editorials in the paper.
Didn't hear he was not.
Yep.
I don't think Bessie knows.
I think if I were...
Which they don't.
As much as I don't want to meet next Thursday night.
Since it was,
I was thinking
since
that.
this is it,
Yeah.
I'm staying o'clock.
Do they draw boxes? Who gets to go last in the sequence each time?
Bill might be late. Yeah. Bessie's not.
Good evening. I'd like to call to order the City of Albany Budget Committee meeting. May we have a roll call, please?
Collins?
Here.
Chrisman?
Here.
Pearson?
Here.
Keller? Canopa?
Here.
Bolden?
Here.
Olson? Summers?
Here.
Callum?
Here.
Connolly?
Here.
Kopsinski?
Here.
Coburn? Johnson? 10 present.
Thank you.
And Johnson is excused, and Coburn was going to be late, so he's excused right now.
And Colleen's excused as well. All right, is there any public comment here tonight? No? Okay, then we'll continue on with the department reviews, starting with the police department, please.
Good evening, Madam Chair and the Budget Committee. My name is Mario Latanzio. I'm the police chief, and sitting next to me is Community Education Specialist Sandy Roberts, and she'll be helping me with the crime prevention portion of the presentation. This presentation will probably look a little similar compared to last year. It'll just be updated with the new numbers for our crime statistics for 2013 for the Part 1 crimes, and I also have the latest 2014 numbers in here, but since the FBI doesn't post their 2013, won't post the 2014 numbers probably until September or October timeframe. Staffing proposed for 2015 through 2016 is 88.75 positions. That's one full-time position increase compared to last year. We took a position that was on contract part-time and made that position full-time. Our administrative support supervisor is retiring at the end of June. She had initially retired 3 years ago and then came back to work part-time for the last 3 years on contract. Now she's going to retire full-time, and we had to hire a full-time person to fill that position. So that's the only personnel increase in this budget. Currently, the police department has 60 sworn positions. 36 of those are in patrol. We have 4 squads of 9, and we've had 4 squads of 9 for several years now. The patrol has not increased at all. So as I go through the presentation, I talk about the need for more officers, and I talked about that last year based on calls for service and the crime for the community. Currently, our workload per officer is quite high, and we're about third compared to other people within the similar demographic range as far as 30,000 and 95,000 for the population size. So I'll kind of go through that and explain why I think we're about 8 officers short and kind of where I think they should go. One new thing that I did create, and we started this back in January, is a street crimes unit. My first priority is crime reduction. My second priority is traffic collision reduction. With our crime reduction efforts, because we have a lot of property and drug crimes here in this community, street crimes unit is somebody that we created to try to attack those issues. So I think you probably see in the newspaper lately, we're doing a lot of search warrants for drugs, and that's still going to continue. And we've been doing a lot of focused efforts on drug users and people that are involved in property crimes. For people who aren't familiar with this, FBI categorizes crime into Part 1 crimes and Part 2 crimes. The Part 1 crimes are the more serious crimes, and they categorize that into violent and property. Violent is homicide, rape, robbery, aggravated assault. Property crime is arson, all thefts, and basically breaking into things, like breaking into a house, breaking into a business, breaking into a car. Those are the property part of it. So when you look at Part 1 violent crimes for Albany, you look at our 2013 numbers. Last year I showed the 2012, so we actually dropped down a little bit, but we're about 65% under the Oregon average for violent crime. So this community does very well as far as keeping the violent crime down. Our main issue is property crime. Now, when you look at the 2013 numbers, we were about 31% above the Oregon average. We did very well last year. We reduced the overall Part 1 crime about 17.4%. Most of that was in property. So when you look at kind of where we're at now, it's 33.7 per Part 1 per thousand for property. And that's, when we get done, when the FBI posts it, I'm thinking we're probably still going to be about 10% above the Oregon average. So even though we've seen some reduction in there, we still have a lot of property crime in this community. And one of the problems we're having right now is maintaining our gains that we had last year. So right now we're running kind of flat. We've been as much as 6% above compared to where we were last year. Right now we're between about 0 and I'd say about 2% in that range, and most of that's all in property. Our violent was up a drop, but right now our violence even. And this is our Part 1 crime overall. So we're 34.58, and the Part 1 crime Oregon average is 34.17.
Chief?
Yes.
Would you tell me what the tables below the graph?
That's the comparison between the where we are and the Oregon average per year. So when you look at like 2010, there was a 23.35% increase, so we were higher. 2011, we're at 31.98. 2012, we're at 34.10. And 2013, we had a reduction down to 24.23, but we're still 24% above the Oregon average.
Okay, thank you.
So when you look at populations, 30,000 and 95,000, and you look at violent crime, and you look at where Albany is, we are extremely low. So we are probably the second lowest. The one lower than us is Lake Oswego. Remember, this is using 2013 data. When you look at 2013 data for Part 1 crime for properties, we're the third highest. So we're above the Oregon average. So you got Medford as number 1, Springfield number 2, and Albany is number 3.
Question?
And then
Chief?
if you look at the overall Part 1 crimes, we're also the third highest. And the reason for that is usually the property crime has the largest volume of numbers, so that usually kind of takes over the amount of property crime you have. And this isn't an exact science, because when you have communities that have a lot more violent crime, you're going to need a lot more officers to deal with those crimes. So when one violent crime occurs, depending on the crime, it's going to require more officers to investigate that crime versus a property crime.
Chief?
Yes.
The fact that we are well above in property crime, reasons for that, I've heard, that is because of drug use.
That's correct.
And are we getting a handle better on that?
That's why we created the street crimes unit,
Yeah.
was to attack those issues. But it's 1 sergeant and 3 officers. It's going to take a while for them to get things going. When you're working that area, it takes a while to get the cases developed. But if you've seen recently, we've probably done 3 or 4 search warrants. We've probably got some more coming up here in the near future that they've been working on. So I think you'll see us do a little bit better in that area. It's just going to take a while to happen. Like I tell people, this isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. You know, there isn't one exact thing that you're going to do that all of a sudden the crime rate's going to go down. It's a combination of, basically, you got to solve the problem. So you work through crime prevention, you also work through enforcement, you look at the big picture, try to figure out why is this issue occurring in the first place. Because I can go to a particular area and make arrests all day long, I have not solved the problem if I'm continuing to go back there and making those arrests. So I got to figure out why, what's going on in that environment, what can I do to change it? Is it a landlord issue? Is it somebody they're always are consistently renting to the same type of people and that needs to change? Do we need to hold a landlord responsible for the activity, for the crime occurring on their property? Is it an environmental issue? Why are they coming to that area? Is there a lot of brush or different things that make people want to hide behind there, and it makes it more conducive? Is there low lighting, so it's more conducive for crime to occur? So we try to evaluate the whole issue and then try to come up with a solution.
Thank you.
So part of the property crime issues you said are drugs.
Yes.
What drugs are topping the list these days?
Methamphetamine is currently the highest. We have seen a rise in heroin, but in this community, it's methamphetamine.
Thank you.
Now, we're looking at sworn officers per 1,000. We're about in the middle. Remember, this doesn't take into account crime rate. It just takes into account the amount of officers per 1,000. When you look at Part 1 crimes per sworn officer, now if you remember last year, we were actually above the average. This year, now we're down from the standard deviation. Now, half of the standard deviation there is about 28.83. So for 2013, we're at 35.87. If you include the numbers that we had for 2014, we're a little bit above the average, but then you have to take into account, how did everybody else do with their crime fighting, and some of those numbers change. So I have a hard time trying to relate 2014 to the 2013 when the 2013 numbers all across the board. One thing I look at here is in order to reach 31.65, it would take us 8 more officers using our 2013 numbers. And I heard someone last time when I presented, what would we do with the 8 officers? Well, we would add 4 more to patrol, because that would give us 4 squads of 10 instead of 4 squads of 9. Currently, right now, our minimum staffing is at 7. It's been at 7 for years. I would like to increase that to 8. That way we've got more officers on the street. We don't have anybody in traffic right now, so I'd add 2 officers to traffic, then I'd add 1 more officer to street crime and 1 more officer to detectives, and that would be the 8 additional officers. When you look at our injury and fatal collisions, right now, for 2014, we're about 2.46 per 1,000. That's on the rise. Currently, as of this week, our injury accidents are up about 48% compared to where they were last year. Now, that's only, the numbers aren't huge. That's 12 additional injury accidents compared to the previous year, but that's still a lot of accidents for this size of a community. When you look at when our numbers were low, that was when we had dedicated traffic officers that were assigned in the department. But since currently we have 3 frozen positions, when they froze the first 2 officer positions, that's when we lost the traffic unit. And since I've been here, they used to have canines that would work nights. Both our canine officers are also assigned to patrol, because we don't have the luxury to put the canine officers out there at night, not assigned to a particular patrol squad, because I need to use them for minimum staffing because we don't have enough officers. Calls for service. When you look at our calls for service, last year we had an increase of 6.2%. I had our crime analyst pull our numbers through April of this year. We're currently 1.2% up compared to last year. So over the last 2 years, we're 7.4% up in calls for service. Now, just because our crime's going down, that doesn't mean our calls for service are going down. There's a lot more self-initiated activity. You have a lot of other types of calls that aren't Part 1 crimes that we're responding to. So as the population continues to grow, as we add more apartment complexes, those types of things, we're going to have more calls that we go to. And a lot of the calls could be Part 2 crimes. So there could be domestic violence issues to where it's not going over, it's not so egregious to where that it becomes a Part 1 crime or it's an aggravated assault, but they're misdemeanor assaults. So some of those things will increase as the community grows, and we need more manpower to be able to respond to it. So when we're looking at our accomplishments and our challenges, for 2013, we had an 8.9% reduction. We had a 17.4% reduction in 2014. So over the last 2 years, we have had a 26.3% reduction as compared to 2012. But our calls for service have gone up, and our accidents have gone up. And then, like I said before, right now, we're having a hard time maintaining our gains that we have over the last 2 years. Last October, November is when we had our most significant decrease in crime. So come this year, if for some reason we can't maintain that, our crime rate's going to start to go up, and we could end the year on a plus instead of a negative. Our goal is another 5% reduction. I just don't know if we're going to be able to achieve it.
Chief,
Yes?
I noticed that you, like this page 7 shows 17.4% reduction in Part 1 times 2014, but then back on page 2, you've got the Part 1 violent crimes. That does show an increase from 2013 to 2014, looking at the,
Yeah, but those numbers are so low because the violent crime here is, I don't have the numbers, that's probably an increase of like 2 or 3 actual crimes.
still an increase.
Yeah, so it's an increase, but it's a really low increase. So the main issue we have here is the property crime. And right now, the violent crime is flat, so I think as of last week, we had 20 Part 1 violent crimes so far this year, and we had 20 so far last year. I think we're about 658 for total Part 1 crimes, and I think last year we were at 657. So we're kind of right at that flat part, but usually some of our numbers will change because of our computer system that's so old. It takes a while for us to get the data from it because we got to enter it into 2 different systems. By the time the officer gets the report done, by the time we're able to pull that data in the secondary system, our numbers will go up a little bit. That's why sometimes I say we're between 0 and 2%, because we'll probably add 9 or 10 cases over the course of the week that are Part 1 crimes.
How close are we to implementation or getting ready to purchase, or, RFP gone out on the new system?
Currently right now, as of this week, we've got 2 companies that are leading as far as, I don't want to talk about it since they're still doing the evaluation part of it. They went out this week back east to visit both those companies. I'm hoping the next couple months we'll probably have a contract, and then implementation after that will be sometime next year by the time it's fully implemented for both us and the county. So within the next year, hopefully we'll be on the new system.
So, I don't know, when I did the ride-along, it seemed like it took a long time to double, triple enter stuff.
It does, and it also takes you to log on. You're logging on to multiple systems,
Right.
so it takes you a while to get logged on to all those systems before you can go available. So one of the issues we have, like in the morning, if it's cold out, if it's in the winter, by the time you start your car, since we don't have any covered parking, you have to de-ice it by the time you can log into your computer and get all that done. And because we're on a 7-to-7 shift, there's no overlap. If a call's waiting, it may take us a while to respond to that call.
Do you have an idea of time savings or that program will give us?
No, I don't. The main benefit of it isn't so much more time savings, it's more information to the officer on the street, because instead of asking dispatch for some of those things, all they have to do is touch a part of the screen, the information's right there. So I know, like with one of the vendors that we saw, when it sends you the call, it also sends you the data, and it will automatically to that address check to see if anybody is shown living at that address. It will check them to see if anybody has warrants. It'll also pull up previous incidents there automatically, so it's on a tab. You just click it, and it'll kind of tell you if we've been out there before, how many times we've been out there, to let you kind of know what you're responding to when you arrive on scene.
Thank you.
So in maybe 2 years, because you said it won't be fully implemented till, I'm going to say, the beginning of next year, and then it'll take a year before you can start doing evaluations as to efficiencies gained through the
That's correct. And
use
it'll
of
take
this.
the officers a little while to learn the new systems.
Right.
I mean, in the previous department, we went through this, and it was a large department, so by the time I got trained to the time that the software was implemented, it was like 3 months later. So a lot of us had forgotten what we were trained on. So we're trying to use the new system, so it took a while. And then some of it's going to depend, too, on our integration, because we want to keep the same property and evidence system that we have now. Well, how well can we make sure that's integrated? And if there are any hiccups in there, then we have to work through some of those. We're also going to NIBRS versus UCR. So NIBRS is a new system that we're all going to have to get used to, that the FBI is going to require us to go to. And so a lot of the CompStat stuff I do now, I'll kind of be starting flat because it'll have new data points in there, and then we'll have to almost go for a year and then evaluate it from there.
Is that system the protocols for getting into the machines and using the data, or being able to enter the data?
Well, no, well, the NIBR system is something different. That's, I'm talking about the crime rates here. We'll be talking a little bit different with the new system the FBI is employing. Right now, we're using UCR, but they're changing over to a system called NIBR. It's got nothing to do with how this computer software works.
All right, it's the
Probably
tabulation.
confused you, I'm sorry.
Okay.
One thing that we did start last year is we started a Community Policing Advisory Board, and that's something we meet every month. The second Tuesday of the month, we meet at the library. I usually have between 8 to 15 citizen groups show up, and we try to select people who represent a larger group. So we'll have people from businesses, or we'll have somebody there who has a block watch. You know, that way they can bring information to us if there's anything going on in their area. We also try to have an education segment. So like last time we met, we had Robert Hayes there to talk about medical marijuana and Measure 91. And since he's on the committee helping establishing some of the rules or asking some of the questions as a representative from OACP, which is the Oregon Chiefs of Police Association. He is helping kind of formulate that and then give us some of that information, and then we're sharing it with the community. And that was one way for us to try to help work more with the community and reach out. And then they also do things like book drives, coat collection, that type of thing. And then also, I talked earlier before, I talked about our street crimes units that we started, and there's 4 there right now. I would eventually like to probably add somebody else to it, but I think my next priority first is traffic, and then after we go through some of the other community resource stuff, I'll talk about kind of where we're at with traffic and what I'd like to do next. And I'll let Sandy talk a little bit about our crime prevention.
Hi, I'm Sandy Roberts with the Police Department, and following up what the chief said about our high property crimes rate, addressing it from a prevention side. So preventing that crime before it happens is really important, because we can close opportunity gap with our citizens, our business owners, and working with our community. So we've done this in a multitude of ways over the last 2 years. We restarted our volunteer program, and we currently now have 5 volunteers. Our numbers now are actually over 1,800 hours since January of 2014. Those volunteers do a lot of work that I couldn't do by myself, and it includes doing inspections on homes for seniors that are 55 and older. They are trained in installing deadbolt locks for those homeowners who do not have a deadbolt, who cannot put dowels in their windows for preventing a break-in. Looking at their lighting, looking at their property overall, any recommendations they can make to them. But it's outreach to our community members that I couldn't do alone. So they also assist us at events. They have a lost child booth at River Rhythms. They are just amazing people that show up almost every day and help us out in any way they can. We also started Albany Police and Kids Scholarship Program, and our BOLD program under that, which is a middle school recognition program. Our Albany Police and Kids, our hope is that our 2 school resource officers are working with kids every day and finding kids that are at risk. And how can we mentor them? How can we find a way to get involved with them to show them great life skills? Through sports is where we're focusing right now, and trying to plug kids into a sport, whether it's soccer or track or baseball. What's their interest? What gets them excited? And then following them through school. Our BOLD program, our Bringing Up Learning and Behavior program, we have started with the Gap School District. All 4 of our middle schools are recommending every month kids from the 4 different middle schools. We have community partners that have helped us out with this program. Mike Speeton from State Farm has volunteered his limo. We pick these kids up who have been recognized for improving some behavior. It might not be a big behavior, it might be quite small, but it's giving them positive reinforcement for improving their behavior. They sit down, they have breakfast, they meet here at City Hall with all of our great staff here. welcoming them, and they sit down with the mayor and police officers and have breakfast. And we get to have a conversation about who they are and what they're doing and what great work they're doing, and hopefully making a connection with them. So we have 56 kids now. As of in 2 weeks, we will have had our last bowl breakfast. It's been a very successful year. And we're hoping to continue mentoring them by inviting them to walk with us in the Veterans Day Parade and making connections with them next year as they move on through middle and high school. So it's our way of connecting with them. We currently have a Lynn County mental health crisis worker who is now coming to Albany Police Department twice a week, I believe she is, and doing outreach with our police officers and through our community resource unit. She reviews the calls for service where there might have been a contact with somebody who could use services. And again, it's outreach. It's going out into our community and identifying folks, going to them before we get called to go to them. And I think that's a great prevention piece. Social media, connecting with a group of citizens that they use social media. We didn't do that before, and now we are. And we started a Twitter page. We have an app, a free police department app called MyPD that anybody can download with an Android or an iOS system. And it connects them with the police department, feeds them into our Facebook, our website, our phone numbers directly to the police department. We also started a club program, which is a car theft prevention tool. We found a really low-cost law enforcement deal. We purchased them for $12.49, and we sell them for $12.50 at the front counter. Anybody can come in and buy a club, but it's in hopes of reducing that stolen vehicle or even the opportunity to break into a vehicle. CPTED, Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design. When the chief came in 2013, he said, you will be going and becoming a CPTED practitioner, and I am a certified practitioner in CPTED. And what that is looking at the built environment to prevent crime. And this has afforded us an opportunity to work with other departments in the city as well. I've been working really closely with Parks and Recreation and with building and with planning, and it's been really exciting. With building or with planning, I've had an opportunity to look at over 68 project plan reviews and pre-project reviews. And it's been exciting to be able to work with builders and planners and speak into that crime prevention piece. And then also we're site surveys. That is, anybody in the city can call me and I will come out and do a survey on their property and make recommendations in a written form and what CPTED is. And all of that's for free and confidential. I've done upwards of 21 of those reports since, and we get calls all the time just working with citizens in that way. Some individual projects we've done is we have worked with Waverly Cemetery. We've helped connect the Horticulture Club out at LBCC with the folks who run the cemetery and cleaning up a really large camp that's been there for years. A lot of trash. We filled up a half of a giant dumpster in about 2.5 hours of trash. And trying to clean up the cemetery so folks who were using the cemetery felt safe to use it. We've partnered with Oregon State Credit Union for Shred Day. We've done that now for 2 years. It's been really exciting. Last year we upped the number of cars through there. We'd like to think that it was us partnering with them, but by 75 cars. This year it was 150 cars, additional to what they had done in the past. So it's a great way of reducing financial crime. Working with our Parks and Rec along the Dave Clark Trail, we've done some projects there. We've started a Can You ID Me page for cases that we haven't identified a suspect, but we get video surveillance or photo information, and that's on our website, getting that information out to the public so the public can get involved. They might know someone. We started an online bike registration where our community can register their serial number. Most bikes that are stolen, in 2013 we had 212 bikes stolen. We had 21 of those with serial numbers. The rest of them we cannot return to an owner. So it's recording that serial number. So we started an online free registration. People can upload a picture, their serial number, and it's recorded for them. We started a wanted persons page for folks to peruse and see who in our community is wanted and should they know them. We got involved with fire, invited us. They've been doing the yearly treasure hunt for years, and they invited us to be a part of that in October. And we had over 452 kids come to the police department. We've never had so many kids come down to our police department. It was exciting. Most people said, we've never even been here. So that's great. Know where your police department is. We're involved with Safety Camp every year, over 200 kids that we work with for 2 different weeks. We worked on some grants to fund our Albany Police and Kids. We received a $2,500 grant from Walmart. We received a $2,500 grant from Walmart to provide Shop with a Cop for foster kids. We received a Home Depot grant in the amount of $1,000 for our SASSY program, which is our senior safety inspection. And then we work together in a lot of partnerships like Lynn Together and working with the GAPS program and getting electronic cigarette literature into their parent handbooks. And we now have we've been without a child seat technician for quite a few years, and we now have someone certified to go out and do those events.
Any questions on crime prevention?
Yeah. The SEPSED program, I know, do you have a list of people who have cameras pointed toward the street?
We do not.
Well, in my area, we have a number of people who do. And we have been broken into here, there, and yon for, so we're finally getting to the point where we're putting in a license plate camera. One of us is going to put it in the corner, aimed toward a specific spot in the street that people have to go. So there are probably 80 cameras in the area, but that one will say who the guy is with any luck. That's why I asked you about the cover on the. I think we probably ought to contact you and get someone to come out and take a look at the pointing of the cameras and that kind of stuff.
And we have a long list of what we'd like to do, for sure, additional projects. And one of them has been to make a list of businesses so that our officers know if we had a burglary at this incident, say downtown. We know which businesses have CCTV. We know how to contact them via phone. We know what their DVR is because it's all proprietary software, each individual purchase. And knowing how to access that information is really important, and so which we can do. So we've talked about doing that and creating a database of contact basically for our officers. It's just on our to-do list.
Well, it's important that you understand how to do it because, quite frankly, I mean, in our neighborhood, how often do you get broken into or a problem happen? And so while I have the system sitting there with 16 cameras pointed here, there, and yon, going in and making it do what I want it to do, there's so much time that goes in between, I don't remember how to do it. And so I fight the battle every time. If there was someone who knew Samsung and this and that and the other, all the systems, it would be a great benefit to everybody, I think. All right, thank you.
Question?
Yes. On your APAC and your bulb programs, how new are they?
We started those, we got the ball rolling in 2013, or beginning of 2014, and this will be we'll be finishing our first school year with our bulb program. So every month since September, minus December. So this May will be our last breakfast with the kids for May. We have one child that we've been able to sponsor through gymnastics. This child was a runaway that was identified by a school resource officer, and she had a safe home but had chosen to run away, and she was doing some things that were very unsafe for her. And through a conversation of what makes you happy, what makes you, just our school resource officer taking the initiative to say what makes you happy, and she said, I always wanted to do gymnastics. And I can happily say that this year, the full school year, I believe it was as of the end of January, she had not had one tardy day, she had not had one late day, and it was just a kind of a success story in making contact with a child. that we were able to provide something in her life that she needed at that time.
What are some of the other evaluation points you're looking at to see the success of these programs?
We're going to have essays written by the kids through the sports scholarship program. We're working with the school admin staff on how the kids are doing, because they're there all day and we're not there. We only have 2 school resource officers for all the schools. And it's going to be our school resource officers checking in. For me, the BOLD program will be identifying those 56 kids for next year. Are they still in the school system? Where are they at? Where can our SROs find them? And then taking those kids and plugging them into our scholarships too, those kids that need it. And making contact with them through our Veterans Day program and walking with us. It will be hard. It's a lot of kids and 3 people. But if we do nothing, we do nothing.
Right.
So.
But then you've got that next group
Yes,
that you're
we
going to
do.
bring in, and then the
Yes,
next
we do.
group. So it's
Yep.
kind of builds, doesn't it?
It does.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Scott?
I hear great things in the community about the efforts that you've started and everything. What has been your greatest challenge or difficulty in our community? Something that's been a roadblock or stopped you from doing what you wanted to do? I mean, I hear great successes here, but what's the thing that's holding you back? Is there anything? Have you had resistance from business or processes or people?
I would say is just having enough personnel to do all the stuff we're trying to do.
Sure.
And we used to have 2 community education specialists assigned to the police department.
Yeah.
One position right now is currently frozen. So Sandy has had to take the workload of 2 people, and then plus some of my new ideas that I've been trying to do and try to manage all that. That was one of the reasons we brought on some volunteers to try to help her with that workload. So the community's been great. A lot of everybody's been real receptive. I mean, if you look over at McDonald's and where Super 8 is and seeing, how that's all been cleaned up and some of the work, that was all the businesses over there who were wanting to do something about the issues they were having and coming together and then doing something with it. So we just need, help to have another person to be able to do that.
And I see that if I were to look at our other entities, it's, I've worked so closely with Parks and Rec, amazing people over there, just there's not enough of us, right, on these big projects. But again, if we don't do something, we do nothing. And so it's just that, it's a marathon. It's a marathon, for sure. No, our businesses, the amount of support, our BOLD program is funded by individual businesses every single month. And those businesses are invited to come eat with the kids every month. And why are they there? And why are they supporting these kids? But it's wonderful because it's getting our community involved with the kids that are doing the work. And
I've enjoyed going to, each of the breakfasts, and it's just amazing. You see the kids are so excited to come, arrive in a limousine, because the limousine goes around to each school to pick them up. And when they get here, they say, oh, I'm really nervous. They're just very nervous. But afterwards, when they're able to, have a breakfast, visit with their school counselors there, visit with their police department, and just have a very casual type chit chat, they really, they're leaving in such a fun manner, and where they've just really enjoyed it, really, really got to end up knowing the police department and City Hall, to see this can be a friendly place. And it's really rewarding seeing the kids. The last one we had, I was amazed at the parents that came out. So there was a great turnout for parents, and they're very proud of their child or some of them are even grandkids that are coming out and being able to make this accomplishment, because it's all done by their teachers have recommended that they that they get this award. So it's been a great program. I really appreciate, Sandy, you taking this on, and staff does a great job with it. So I think we're really touching a lot of youth's lives.
Okay, going on to our next slide, our previous reductions. So currently, we've had actually 7 positions that are frozen. We show 6 here. We have 1 that we're bringing back come July 1st, and then will still leave us with 6. 3 of those are sworn positions, 1 captain and 2 police officers. I do not need another captain. What I do need are more sworn officers on the street. So, in my next slide, I'll talk about that a little bit. Another issue we have is equipment replacement. A lot of our vehicles, our patrol vehicles, are leased. So every year for the last few years, we've had to slowly drop down our equipment replacement money that we've been putting in there because we didn't have enough money in the budget to stay afloat. So currently this year, we're putting about $128,000 in there. So I'm fine for next year. The year after that is when I'm going to be short. So next fiscal year, even if I put in another $128,000, I'll probably be, for that year, be about $110,000 short. The following year, I'll be several $100,000 short. So normally, we would like to be around $220,000 a year putting into equipment replacement, but right now, that's a lot less. So since we had some savings in there from the money that was built up from before, it's got us through to this part. But our critical year is going to be next year where we're going to need an influx of money or we're going to have some issues with vehicles. Because at least we have mandatory payments we have to make and we won't have enough money to do it. Current challenges, as I talked before, is maintaining kind of where we've been with our crime. Like I said, our current need is for more sworn officers. If I was able to get one more position, I would assign them to traffic. But as I said before, it takes us about a year to hire and train somebody. So it'll take me 2 to 3 months usually to hire and about 10 months to train by the time they go to the academy and they go through field training. Now, we've been able to cut that down lately because we've hired a lot of lateral officers, and we've had good success with that. We've hired, I think, 3 from California, 1 from Idaho, and we hired 1 from Texas. All of them with 7, 8, 10 years experience. Some were previous supervisors, previously on SWAT, and they've brought that experience here. A lot of them want to change their lifestyle from where they live, and they're moving to Oregon. So, and that's kind of where we've been trying to recruit to. So when you look at some of my increases, especially in the levy, it's increased because I'm not bringing people in at a step A. I'm bringing them in at a step D, and most of them have families. So when you look at the increase for the levy, you'll see the increase in benefits and you'll see the increase in pay. And that's what it's due to. It's due to us bringing in lateral officers who already have experience. And that helps us out because they don't have to go to the academy, and usually they can get through our field training program quicker than somebody who has never been a police officer before. So that gets them out on the street quicker where they're solo and they're able to help fill our gaps. So when you look at our general fund, we got an increase of 2.88%. Most of that is just for personnel costs, so that covers the COLA and that covers the insurance increases and any other type of increases that we've had. The major increase you've seen there is for the levy, and that's because of the laterals that we've hired. Largest increases in the general fund with some personnel services and then the material services, and all those items that are increased there, I've got no control over. So those are items that had to be increased. Our insurance and bonds went up, maintenance and communications equipment went up, admin services went up, and IT services went up, all fixed items that we don't have any control over. And basically everything else that's in there is pretty much flat. If we increase something like $1,000 or $2,000, it's just because of the expenditures from the previous year. We're showing that, and we increased it so that we'd have enough money in that category.
What's driving the decrease in temporary employees? Is that part-time?
Yes.
Previously retired
we
person?
moved a position to full-time. Any questions?
Jeff?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, back on the slide under current challenges, at the very bottom of it, it says estimated cost is, for a sworn officer, an estimated cost is $107,000.
That includes benefits, that
Okay.
includes equipment also.
Okay.
That includes everything to be able to put somebody, and that's assuming we're putting this person in our traffic unit. So that includes a computer, that includes a workspace for them. So we included everything into that position. If we were going to add one more to that, I would actually have to add another car to the position.
Okay.
So when I had talked before to council, this was last February, I talked about trying to get 4 new positions, and I had them categorized. The first one was the admin services one, supervisor, which we were able to put in. Our next one was a sworn position, which we don't have enough money for right now, but that's another one I'm asking for. The next one would be a communication specialist, because we need one more person to help offset some of the manpower issues we have in dispatch. A lot of times we'll have supervisors working in there, And luckily, my records supervisor was a previous dispatcher, because sometimes they'll have to go in and fill time at the dispatch console just because we don't have enough personnel right now. And the last one was another officer. And my goal for both those officers' positions was to create a traffic unit.
Well, and I know it's never a one-for-one type of trade, but looking at the detail part of the budget, there's $540,000 budgeted for overtime. So adding an officer, would that help with some of that overtime? Could some of that overtime be
It may a little
allocated
bit.
to another officer?
Part of the problem we have is because of the way our staffing is, all our training is done on overtime. So what that does is that covers minimum staffing, it covers training, and it covers court time. And sometimes it covers investigation. So like if we have a major investigation on the weekend, that covers the overtime for the officers to come out. It may help reduce some of my minimum staffing time, but if I sign into traffic, that won't. What will help me is if we get the 8 additional officers and I'm able to put extra people in patrol, then that would help me to reduce that. But usually, when you're looking at manpower and you're looking at overtime, usually trying to reduce the overtime, because $500,000, I mean, it sounds like a lot of money, but when you're looking at over the life of the year and looking at how many people we have, most of that money goes to our sworn officers. Very seldom, we'll get a little bit towards dispatch, and that's more because we're short one dispatcher that's currently frozen. If that position wasn't frozen, we'd probably have a little bit less overtime in dispatch. But a lot of the stuff we can't control, because sometimes the officers will work beyond their shift because they're stuck on a call or stuck on a case. We'll have to pay them overtime for that. So I really don't see adding a position is going to really reduce my overtime that much.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
It's great that you're able to attract out-of-state people to want to, join the service. Is there not any applications at all coming in from folks that are getting out of the service that are just, put in for 6, 8 years and decide they want to get out of the service?
We've got one person in FTO right now who is a former Marine, and we do have people that we've hired from the military coming through the academy. But some of the issues that I've had is getting people through the academy and through our field training program. So, I mean, I've had previous people from the military not make it through field training because they're not used to that, and it kind of depends on what branch of service they come from and what their experience is. Are they assertive enough? Can they control a situation? Can they take charge? Some of them, because they're in the military, haven't had that experience, and the way that our academy is set up here in Oregon, they don't run a stress academy. The academy is non-stress. It's almost like going to college. So when they get out of the academy and they go to field training, that's a lot of times where they get the stress and the pressures of the job. Well, some people can handle it, and some people, it's not their fault. They physically can't do it. They can't think on their feet. Something will come up. They don't know what to do. Sometimes their brain shuts down. And that's a physical thing that sometimes that stuff is tested when you run a stress academy. I'm used to, in Arizona, all our academies are stress academies, so you'll have 30 to 40% attrition rate in the academy, where here you're lucky you'll lose anybody out of the academy. You end up testing that in field training and when they're on the street. My preference is to test it in the academy, but that's not how Oregon's set up. Any other questions?
So we have 2 canine units right now?
That's we actually have 3 dogs.
3 dogs?
2 assigned to patrol and 1 drug dog, and he's assigned to street crimes.
So I read in the paper they did a real nice article about a canine that is going to be retired because it also sniffs for marijuana. And
That's
there
correct.
was a difficulty of possibly cases being thrown out if it was an erroneous search of something that's legal as of July 1st. Do we have that issue? Do we have any canines that?
We have 1 drug dog, and some of that's going to depend on how you conduct your investigations. So we're working with that to see how that's going to work for us. We think we have a workaround to make that work. We'll see how it goes. If it doesn't, then we'll have to retire the dog and purchase another canine.
Okay.
Any questions? Yes, sir.
With the marijuana issue coming up very quickly, what is your department doing about identifying those who are under the influence of marijuana and I'm saying operating motor vehicles and those safety issues?
We are, I think it might be this week, we're sending one more person through drug recognition expert school. We have, I believe, 3 others that are already certified. We just don't have a lot of people who are certified on the department. It's a skill set that takes a lot of work. You also have to maintain your certifications. You have to have so many DREs through the year. At least 2 of our people are instructors, and they go out and help instruct. So I know Robert Hayes, he goes all over the country to instruct, and he was also helping the legislature work through some of the issues with Measure 91 and trying to let them know what'll work for law enforcement, what doesn't, so they can come up with, the best of that situation.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions?
This isn't a question, it's a statement.
Okay.
And so I don't really expect a response from anybody, because I understand how this works, and I understand there's really nothing anybody can do about it. But when you look at your budget and you get past the line item as far as personnel, the 2 largest items are central service charges and information technology, and that makes up almost $900,000 of your budget, and that's really sad.
I think you partially addressed it earlier, but one of the line items was 66011, 65008, maintenance, communications equipment. That's part of that. That's doubling, and that's because of the trying to combine with the counties and stuff. How is that? It's going from 12,000
Is that
to
the
24,000.
$12,000 increase?
Yeah.
That was for radios and dispatch. Because of the 700 megahertz system that we're on.
It's okay.
And right now, we paid, because it's new and we're in this new group, last year, or this coming year, we're paying $45,000 a year. The following year after that, it's going to be $90,000 a year to maintain in that group, so it's going to double again.
Since Jeff gets to make a comment, I'm going to make a comment too. I don't expect a response, but this is an issue I raised last year. And last year I talked about setting priorities as a city, what's our greatest issue before us. And Wes told us that this year is a maintenance budget, that not much is changing and things can possibly operate status quo. When I look at our police services, I really look that we are underfunded and we're still doing nothing to address it. And when we look at the priorities of our city, our greatest priority, that we have a safe city and we're not being stolen, we're not being vandalized, we're not being hurt, we're not having all these other things. So many things improve the quality of life after we have a life. And I think one of the things that we are remiss in as a budget committee is we're not finding ways to fund our police department. And I know it's maintenance budget, and I know that maybe 8 personnel and quite possibly $1 million that would add to the budget. We have to find somewhere in between and start taking steps. If it takes a full year to be able to bring individuals on, we should be taking steps to be able to allocate those funds and be ready to fund them next year and the year after, where we can start addressing having adequate personnel in our police department. That's my personal opinion. Again, it's based on priorities. What's our greatest priority? Eliminate the budget and start a city from scratch. And our most important thing is probably second behind that would be our fire department. Everything else we build afterwards. And we're still remiss in not funding our police department.
Well, I don't want to get in a discussion and debate on that one, so, because I think we can go on the overall city programs it takes. There's a lot of programs we do that alleviates the demand also on our police and fire, so. I mean, if a solution is we are lacking funding for our police and our fire, there is many communities that do impose a public safety fee on their utility. I mean, we've been, pretty conservative here in Albany. We don't impose any utility fees. That is an option, because in other words, we can't go out to levy more, go to the voters for more of a levy because we're in compression. So we're not even fully imposing, being able to get the full amount that we're authorized to impose. So I understand it's it's a big challenge, and to try to come up with that balance, but we have gotten our budgets down so lean, and mostly from the downturn in the economy, that if we start whittling away with other programs that are supporting the amenities in our community, we will affect that livability. And if we don't have a livable community, it's going to put more of an impact on our police department.
So over the last several years, we've at times had, I remember adding 2 traffic officers for a period of time, then they went away. Can you talk about why you'd be choosing to add those as opposed to adding to the street crime team?
Because I've just established a street crime team. I want to give them a chance to see what they can do. My next need is traffic, and I don't want to take away from that. Since I pulled from other areas to create street crimes, next one I want to do is traffic, for traffic safety.
Did you pull from traffic to create street crimes?
Yeah, I pulled one person, yes.
Okay.
He came from patrol, so he was in traffic. He went to patrol because of the shortages. When he came back, he was also our canine handler for our drug dog. So it didn't make any sense for me to have my canine handler, who has my drug dog, in traffic. It made more sense to have him in street crimes, where he's actually doing that type of work. So I moved him to street crimes, which left us nobody in traffic. And then those 2 positions, I mean, we froze 2 positions back in 2010. So it's been 5 years since we had those 2 additional officers. I would like to maybe at some point be able to add one more, and if I can get everybody through FTO here, I may be able to add 1 person to traffic in the near future. But my problem is patrol. I may have somebody having surgery pretty soon. We just had a retirement, somebody just left, and the backfill for that person, we've hired that person, but they're going to go to the academy, and it doesn't start till August. So I'm always playing this catch-up game. So I always got to have a few people in hiring and training, because that'll never change based on retirements and how long it takes to get somebody trained. So we really need to add more officers to the department.
So are you forecasting to come in under budget on your personnel this year?
Yes.
By how much, do you know? I mean, I see these numbers year to date, but
it'll probably be a little over 300,000.
Okay.
And a lot of that's in benefits.
Okay. And in some years, we've talked about, we had a number of fatality accidents, and there were certain intersections, and we did the traffic cameras, and can you talk about where we are on that? Do we still have like Waverly and Sandy Am? Is that the...
Waverly and Sandy Am was the number 1, and then Gary and Sandy Am was number 2. Gary and ninth in that area.
Is it better even without the traffic patrol? Are we still using the cameras there?
Well, no, the cameras, because that's ODOT, the cameras aren't there.
Okay.
The camera is at Gary and Queen.
Okay.
We couldn't put anything up there because it was ODOT controlled, and it required a lot of other stuff to be done. And we haven't, there's some studies, and I don't even know if we could get ODOT to approve it. Part of the problem with that area in there, a lot of it's an engineering design, and the way the area was designed. A lot of times when you look at accidents, I mean, law enforcement can only do so much. A lot of it you have to come in and re-engineer that area. So I know from Mesa, where I came from, we had one intersection that was like number 2, the number of accidents we had. Well, they went in and redid the entire intersection. They made it larger, they made 2-way left turns, and all of a sudden the accidents went way down. So some of the problem we have up here, up on Pacific, Sandy Am, and 9th, all that area, it's the design. And probably at some point we need to look at that to see if there's anything we can do with that design to try to change it. Because when you look at our accidents, our cluster of accidents is always in that area, and it has not changed for the last 2 years since I've been here.
So by adding traffic officers, you're hoping to, what, reduce accidents in the
Well,
rest
I'm
of town?
hoping to
or-
change driver behavior, because part of the problems we have over there is if you come down there, you'll see people, they'll get, all of a sudden, they'll turn on Pacific, and they want to get all the way over. So they'll either make a wide turn and cut somebody off, or they'll turn, all of a sudden, shoot all the way over and cut in front of somebody. A lot of times they'll get clipped. So we have those types of accidents. By having an officer out there watching that and start giving tickets, people will know they can't do that. You're going to have to do your turn signal, you're going to have to wait the amount of time, you're going to have to slow down, those types of things. So that helps it. Another thing we're trying to do is get lights established on the back of the signals so the officers can see down the road when a signal light is changed. So if someone runs a red light, they can pull them over because they can see it. Because right now, some of those intersections take 2 officers to work them in order to be able to affect that. Well, usually we only have 7 officers on the street. I don't have enough officers to do that. So if I had 2 traffic guys, they could set up, one could watch it, one could be down there, and they could tag team it. But right now, since we don't have that, we don't have the manpower to do it.
Thanks.
Other questions?
I think
Thank you.
one of the questions that I have that piggyback with what you've said is, have we reduced the accidents where we're using the camera?
Yes, in that intersection?
Yes.
We only have it in one intersection, yes, we have.
Okay. Thank you.
What's that?
Can I see?
Yes.
One of our number 1 requests into the Community Resource Unit is for traffic calming. We get it almost daily. We have 2 radar trailers that we are able to deploy. They're very, very old. Neither of the computers work in them. They were purchased, I believe, on an ODOT grant. We used to be able to read speeds and download that information. They're far too old for that now. But daily, that is the daily request from the Albany community is, I want that radar trailer out here. What can you do to slow down traffic? We refer a lot of people to the traffic calming program that Ron Irish and engineering runs. That's one thing our volunteers are doing, is they're going out in teams of 2 and running radar. And they're recording license plates, and folks are getting a warning letter in the mail. So, but it's another warning, it's another preventive way of saying, hey, you don't want to get a ticket, slow down, right? But it is one of our number 1 requested things. People are speeding in my neighborhood.
Is there such a thing as a mobile speed bump? Movable speed bump?
I have not
They have
seen.
spikes on them, but yeah, it does work.
That would be a speed spike.
I think part of the problem you'll have is securing it to the roadway and then being able to move it, so that when someone runs over, it doesn't go with the car.
Okay.
I haven't heard of one, so I don't.
Well, hard hat works pretty good. You just throw it underneath the car, but, that makes a lot of noise. That's what you want them to do.
Anything else?
So,
Thank you.
so you talked about the costs for 1 additional officer, and that how they're being, you said that was for traffic, but if you were deploying them in other ways, is it similar?
As far as cost?
Yeah, we were talking about.
Yes, I mean, it may be reduced a little bit because they would need a computer if I put them in patrol. But I think the more cost-effective thing to do is if I put them in traffic, number 1, it makes somebody else out there that's more visible. That's not necessarily always tied to the radio. So a lot of things we'll do, too, is we can look at a particular area, we'll call our hotspot area, and we could put the officer down in that area to do more traffic enforcement. It makes it more visible and also helps to deter crime. So my goal is to try to get more visibility out in the community. So by adding a traffic officer, there's a national program called DDAX, which is data-driven. I don't remember the exact definition for it, but it's taking crime data and traffic data and overlaying it, and then having your officers work in those particular hotspots. And it's usually your traffic unit to try to get them in those areas to, number 1, help affect the traffic flow and the collisions, but it also helps to reduce crime. So,
Thanks.
okay.
Well, good evening, Madam Chair and City Councilors and Budget Committee members. My name is John Bradner, and it's my honor to be your fire chief. And I'd like to start off tonight with thanking you for your service of sitting here and listening to us talk about our departments and our budgets and the challenges that we face, because each one of us, department directors, has identified the challenges, and you'll see some of those in my presentation as well tonight. So thank you for each of you for participating. Also want to thank the members of my department, some of which are here tonight, who spent a lot of time putting this budget together, and then the individuals on the line for all that they do every day, day in and day out, and also their help with putting the budget together. My presentation tonight is going to be similar to the one that we put on last year. Also, obviously, with some changes, some updates, some additional information, and it'll be similar to some that you've seen from the other departments. So I'll just leap into it here. So what your fire department does. This was a slide that I had last year, and I wanted to highlight a couple things. One, obviously, we provide service to not just the City of Albany, but we also have 3 contract districts that we provide service to. So our actual fire protection district is 81 square miles, and then we have an even larger ambulance service area, so where our ambulance goes to, and that's actually 205 square miles. So we go from here to the other side of Halsey, up to the north, basically partway between here and Jefferson, and then halfway between here in Lebanon and here in Corvallis as well. So 85% of the calls that we respond on typically are medical, at 15% are fire. That varies a little bit from year to year. I think 2 years ago it was 86 and 14. This last year it was 85 and 15, but it's usually somewhere right in that range. But what I want to really highlight on this page was our emergency responses, how many we go on every single day. And I'll get more into this a little bit later, but our current average is 20.4 emergency responses every single day. And when you compare that to last year, at the end of 2014, we were at 18.8, and the year before, 17.3 per day. So we've seen a 3.1 call per day increase in just over 2 years. So we're actually in a very significant climb as far as the number of emergency calls that we're responding on. And then the second one I want to highlight there is the last bullet point there in red. We transported last year 3,806 patients to the hospital, and that's 219 more than the previous year. Our call volume, and counselors, you've been hearing this from myself and from the city manager, our call volume is going up dramatically over the last couple of years, and I'll get into that in a little bit more in detail later. A few other things your department does. Everybody knows we respond to calls, but we also do training, public education, fire investigations, fire code inspections. We assist the building and planning department with plans review and provide feedback on that. We have an individual in our department who takes care of all city emergency management, ambulance billing and collections, and then our fire med program. And I always like to take the opportunity to talk about our fire med program. It's an outstanding program. We're seeing the membership increase from year to year. It's an affordable alternative for people that can't afford a full ambulance bill to be able to pay the $65 and then have that coverage if they do need our services. So we're continuing to see that program increase as well. Regarding our budget, just as a reminder, in our section of the budget, there are 3 different fire department budgets. The 1202 budget is our levy, 1203 is our fire and life safety services, or our prevention budget, if you will, and then 1208 is our combined suppression and ambulance budget. Previously, those 2 were separated. Last year, going through the budget process, I informed you that we had combined those 2 together. In addition to that, in our section, you will see some grant funds as well, but the 1202, 1203, and 1208 are our main budgets. So going into this year's budget process, the way our process works is the individuals, the end users, the firefighters, the paramedics, the lieutenants on the line, they're responsible for a particular budget area, and they come up with their budget requests. And then ultimately ends up coming up to the management team. And as a management team, we sit down and say, okay, yeah, we can do that. No, we're going to delay this. We need to focus a little bit more here. So this year, going into the budget, I gave the management team my direction on where I wanted to see it go. And my direction was basically 3 points, 3 points that are listed. One was reduce materials and supplies. We need to continue to try and do that. We've done that numerous times before, but we need to continue to try and do that. But the focus this year was on trying to do that in order to do number 2, which was focus funding toward adding additional personnel to deal with the increased workload. And then the third item was address equipment replacement needs, and I'll get into more of that in a little bit as well. So total fire department budget, or the budgets, those 3 combined budgets, is $13,200,000, or just over that. It's a 2.99% increase. There you can see a breakdown by category. Personnel costs, we had a 4.41% increase, and then, like I said, our direction was, my team's direction was to reduce materials and services, and we did. We reduced it by 2.72%.
Excuse me, Chief, when you say reduce services, materials and services, could you focus a little bit tighter so that I understand
Sure.
what areas that you're talking about? Is this central services? Is this materials and supplies? Just what, please?
Mainly more where we were able to reduce was materials and supplies. The categories in the budget are divided up into personnel and then materials and services.
Right.
Obviously, some of those in the materials and services items we have control over, some of them we don't have control over. They're fixed cost. We talked about central service charges a few minutes ago, and a few other items like that. So what we focused on was more of the materials and supplies items of that materials and services section.
Okay, thank you.
And then at the bottom there is a breakdown by program. The 3 budgets I told you about, you can see how much each one of those budgets changed. So I always like to every year remind the Budget Committee about the non-City of Albany property tax revenue that we bring in. So as a department, we have the ability to bring in revenue, and that revenue typically supports about 30% or 30, somewhere in that area. In 2013-14, which is the last full year that's been completed, fiscal year is completed, we actually were able to bring in about 33% of our budget. So a third of our annual operating budget we brought in as revenue back into the city. That pie chart there shows the areas where it was brought in, the biggest area being the ambulance service fees. That amount, the almost 1.9 million, had gone up from the previous year, and because of the increase in call volume that I've been telling you about, we're actually seeing a significant increase in that for this current year, and we will be bringing in probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $270,000 additional dollars in that area over last year than we did previously.
The pie chart that the item I don't see listed, maybe it's under other, equipment replacement funds coming from this non-tax. I mean, you have this money coming in, is any of it being allocated over into equipment replacement?
No, we're not allocating any money toward equipment replacement currently.
Thank you.
Is your ambulance service fees, is there a ratio, if you had a dramatic increase in fire med, would that reduce the ambulance fees then? Because people are taking advantage of the lower cost way to acquire them?
Sure. So I wouldn't say we've seen a dramatic increase in fire med, but we have seen an increase in it. And one of the things that we track constantly is where's that breakover point of here's how much money we're making from fire med and here's how much we're writing off. At this point in time, those two lines, I guess if you will, haven't crossed. So we're still recovering more from the fire med than we would from the ambulance service fees that aren't paid because the individuals have fire med.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Okay. But there is a point that you're
Oh, yeah.
watching, okay, all right.
Sure, you bet. We keep an eye on that.
Have you, in fact, tracked how much it costs to do the fire med?
As far as
you get $165,000 for fire med, and how much when people use fire med, how much does that service cost when we provide the service?
Sure. And I'm not sure if I'm following you correctly, but we're tracking how much we're writing off because the individual has fire med. Is that what you're referring to? No.
How much it costs you to take an ambulance out there and give them the service, the ride to the wherever? I mean, given...
Each one's different, yeah.
That
Each
is
one's
different.
Depending on the type of call, the resources needed. Obviously, the fire med costs $65. Obviously, the ride doesn't cost $65, but you have individuals paying $65 that don't use the service.
Well, does it balance?
The short answer is yes. We do track how much it costs to deliver, to do a fire med run. And what that amounts to is you're then going to compare. Okay, we receive X amount of dollars in fire med revenue. It costs us this much. Let's say the ambulance run was $5,000. We had to write off some percentage of that after, because remember, in fire med, we still collect from their insurance company or Medicaid. And so let's say we wrote off $700 of that $5,000 bill. And what you're tracking, and this is what the chief was explaining, is, how does the balance work? The revenue we receive from fire med, from people's insurance, versus the actual cost of providing the service. Does that get to what you were trying to ask?
No.
I'm lost then.
It costs us however much money total. When you use fire med, they're not using fire med every year. They're paying for it every year, and they're getting the benefits once every however often they're using it. Does the amount that we collect for fire med pay after everything else is paid? Does it make it a zero-sum game?
We make money off fire med.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
So ambulance service fees, fire med, you can see that in there. Rural districts, like I said, we do have contracts with the rural districts. The other one I want to highlight there is our grants and reimbursable programs. That one was up because we were finishing the second year of a SAFER grant, and that was to hire 6 firefighters for the department. And so that was up because of that. So our budget highlights, I'm not going to go through the line items. If you want specific information, have questions on them, I'd be happy to answer them. But really our highlights are, it's a status quo budget with minimal changes. You'll see a lot of zeros or even some negative amounts in them. We've programmed in 1-year decreases in materials and services, or materials and supplies, I guess would be the better term for that. We are budgeting to expend all remaining equipment replacement funds, and I'll get into a little bit more about that. So we will have, at the end of this coming fiscal year, or the end of this budget here, we'll have 0 equipment replacement funds left for the fire department. And we are also implementing a new staffing program, and Wes talked about this in his budget message, and there was a little bit of conversation about it last week. But one of the things that we started looking at is, where are our calls for service coming in? How are they coming in? Is there a pattern in this increase that we can take a look at and say, okay, this is a bigger issue than another area over there. And so one of the things that we identified was that we were having a larger increase in what we call our alpha responses. So we have a priority dispatch system. And for our medical calls, it's Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta. An alpha call is a non-emergency call. Somebody needs an ambulance by itself, and it's typically a basic life support type of a call. It could be a public assistance, somebody has fallen and they can't get up, if you will. It could be somebody that's twisted their ankle yesterday evening, and now it's got to the point that they're immobile and they don't have family or friends that can take care of them. Something along those lines. It's basic life support as opposed to advanced life support. So those calls increased to the point, and actually last year I figured we ran about 2,029 of those alpha responses, that we started trying to identify, okay, is there something that we can do that we can target just those responses? Because right now we're sending an advanced life support ambulance to that basic life support call, because that's all we staff is an advanced life support unit. Sometimes it could be the ambulance that goes, sometimes it might be an engine that goes, but they're all advanced life support. So in identifying that, we started looking at models of other jurisdictions, what they were doing, and trying to find more cost-efficient methods for delivering the service. Plus, also, we want to be able to keep that advanced life support unit available for that advanced life support call for the more serious calls. So the new program we're looking at implementing is a single role basic life support personnel program where we would actually go out and hire 2 basic life support individuals, staff them 40 hours a week on a day car, what we would call a day car, a daytime medic unit, and then they would handle those, as many of those obviously as those alpha responses as they could. Right now, it's something we're still discussing. We have been working on a job description. We'll be sitting down with the union and negotiating the impacts of these positions, but the conversations we've been having so far and the direction we're going is very positive, and we're excited about giving this an opportunity. I think last week Wes compared it to the police department's community resource officers. Same thing. Do you need a police officer to go to this non-emergency fender bender, I guess? I'm not sure if that's something that they do, but it takes a lower qualified individual and puts them on that right type of call, and it keeps that higher qualified individual available for that higher qualified call, I guess, if you will.
Does this give them an opportunity for potential down-the-road advancement into a higher level position at some point then?
Sure. They would be full-time employees with the department. And based on qualifications of who we hired and what experience they had, it would be something where it could end up being a hiring pool for future employees.
Is these positions something like a CNA or a medic, military medic?
Yeah, I can see some correlation between the two. There's in EMTs in the state of Oregon, currently there's 4 levels. There's an EMT, which is the terminology for what used to be called an EMT basic, or when I started, an EMT 1. They've changed the terms over the year, but there's an EMT. There's an EMT advanced, which, same thing going back to when I started, was an EMT 2. I had 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now it's EMT advanced, and they can start IVs. They can do a little bit more, but not a whole lot. There's an EMT intermediate, which can administer some medications. They can do some procedures, but they can't do everything that a paramedic can do, the highest levels of paramedic. So right now, we employ a lot of paramedics because we need that advanced life support care. We employ a few intermediates. I think we have 2 intermediates on the department, and we employ a handful of the EMTs, or the basics, at that level. These new positions, we're looking at bringing them in as an EMT advanced. So lesser than the intermediate, obviously lesser than the paramedic, but a little bit more than the basic is kind of where we're targeting for them. So yeah, I can see some correlation between the examples that you gave there.
Yeah, well, I mean, corpsmen, medics, sew people up, that's IVs, all that kind of stuff are pretty simple in their day.
Sure. Okay, so I want to spend a little bit of time and go over department challenges. I mean, that's really, in a nutshell, our budget, but I want you to be aware of what the challenges are. And they're the same challenges that I spoke about last year. In fact, I don't even think I changed the slide at all. It's probably the same slide that I've been using for the last few years. But our issues are providing consistent, adequate emergency response staffing. And I'll get into more details as to the concerns and issues that we're encountering, but that is something that we're dealing with daily on a regular basis. We need to address community hazard risk reduction with reduced staffing in our life safety division. Mario talked about how they used to have 2 public educators in their department. Fire department the same way. We used to have 2 public educators, and we used to have 3 deputy fire marshals. Currently, I'm at 1 public educator, and I'm at 2 fire marshals, or excuse me, 2 deputy fire marshals. So I'm down 2 positions in that division, and that creates issues, which I'll get into more detail here in a minute. And then we've got to finance our equipment replacement needs. We've got to find a way. You'll see that that's going to end up biting us here real soon. I'll give you more details on that. So our annual emergency calls. I decided I wanted to go back a little bit further to give you a little broader perspective of where we've been and where we're currently at, and the significance of the increase over just the last couple of years. So I actually went back 25 years, back to 1991. And then I wanted to also identify what year we opened the 2 new stations. It was interesting. I was having a conversation with somebody, and they said, how much has your call volume gone up since you built the new stations? And for us, the new stations are now, I guess we're 16 years old since we built them, so they're really not that new. But I did highlight there in 1998 with the arrow when we were running 4,278 calls. That's when we opened Station 13 and 14, 14 in North Albany and 13 out by Home Depot. And so you can see that over the last 2 years, we've actually had an increase of over 1,000 calls, or about a 16% increase over that 2-year period of time. And it's kind of interesting. I would imagine one of the questions that you would have looking at this chart is, well, why were we so stagnant from 2007 to 2013, and in fact had the drop there for a year? And I've been asked that question quite a few times, and the only answer I can really give is the recession. One of the things that we talked about is we thought that when the recession came and we knew we were in the middle of it, we figured people would end up not taking as good a care of themselves, or waiting, I guess, if you will. And so when they called an ambulance, it would be more serious. Their situation would be more serious. And so we figured we would get more calls for service. The exact opposite happened, and not just with our department, but throughout the valley. From talking to my counterparts in the other agencies, they all saw a stagnation or even a slight decrease in their calls. And so we did. For a period of about 6 years there, we were right there at about the 6,400 calls for service. And then in April 2013, and it's interesting because I track the calls daily and I look at them by month and look at them by year, and I could actually look at April, I could look at March of 2013 and see how many calls we ran in that month, and then April of 2013, and between the two we went up about 2.5 calls per day, and then it's stayed up at that level now for just over 24 months, which is quite interesting.
With the number of calls increasing with the number of senior care facilities we have in town?
Sure, you bet. The more senior care facilities increase, the greater number of seniors that we're going to respond on. Currently, I believe that our invoices that we send out, 58 to 60, right around there, percent of them go to Medicare patients. So, I mean, it shows you that of the patients that were transported to the hospital, basically 60% of them are Medicare eligible patients. Every time a care facility opens, they say the national standard is that we will run one additional call per year per bed. So the new facility in North Albany, I heard, was 143 beds in there. So we're counting on about 143 additional calls for that station in that area. If you do go back to 1998, if you don't want to do the math, it's about a 3,200 call increase since we've had 4 stations in this community. So a very significant increase. So as I was looking at this, one of the themes that kept coming back to me, and I'll revisit that here on the next few slides, or one of the questions that kept coming back to me is, so what's the impact? If I were you, I would want to know what's the impact of that. So these emergency calls, the increase in the emergency calls is having an increase, or an effect, a negative effect, I should say, on our response times. The computer system that Chief Latanzio was talking to you about, we're as eager as they are to get that new system through the county, because it's going to help us to be able to track that information better. But we went through, and as a department in the first quarter of this year, we put a lot of emphasis and focus on our response times. Okay, let's do everything that we can as an organization to lower those response times, and let's determine exactly what those are. And so the national standard of generally speaking about 6 minutes from the time somebody calls 911 until we arrive on scene was our target. That's what we were looking at. Can we meet that national standard of 6 minutes from 911, what's your emergency, till the time we get there on scene? And what we found out in the first quarter of this year is we were actually, for our emergency medical calls, and this gets rid of all those alpha calls, so the non-emergency medical calls are excluded from this, but just our emergency medical calls, we were at 7 minutes and 25 seconds was our average. So almost a minute and a half beyond what the national average is. I went back here just recently and I looked at this past week and said, okay, how are those numbers tracking? That was a 3-month period of time. We were at 725. What have we been doing over the last week, just to get an idea of that? And we were right at that same pace. I think what I found for medical calls is that we were 7 minutes and 18 seconds. So somewhere, that was obviously a shorter window of time, just looking at a few days versus a few months. But basically, somewhere in that close to 7.5-minute range is where our response times were. The other national standard is that we should be getting 15 people on the scene of a structure fire within 8 minutes. And during that same first quarter of this fiscal year, our average was 9 minutes. We actually were exceeding that by a minute. And the effects of that, then, are fires are going to grow larger. People are obviously going to have untoward outcomes on medical calls because it's taking us longer to get there. And so that's one of the, so what's the impact, is that it's just taking us longer to get to the scene. The other issue that we're dealing with is oh, sorry, go ahead.
So if it's taking them longer, because I know we used to have a shorter, response time, is it just due to traffic patterns then, and just the amount of transportation? Because we still have the same stations for, 17 years now, so why is it taking longer? Then is it just traffic?
That's a perfect segue into my next point, which is overlapping calls. That's probably the biggest issue. Is what we're seeing is that Medic 12 and Medic 13 go on calls, or those stations go on calls, and then a call comes in at the Mennonite home for a heart attack. Medic 14 from North Albany is having to go clear across town. And so we're seeing a lot of this crews just crisscrossing all over the place. They're handling this, and then this call comes over here, and so they've got to move resources around. And so it's further travel distance to get there is probably one of the biggest things.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was interesting, after the council meeting last night, I stopped by Station 11 and I talked to the battalion chief on duty, Kevin Anderson, and just asked him, how's it going today? And he says, oh my gosh, it's just been crazy. And it's a common theme of what we're hearing. It used to be for us that a 20-call day was a significant day. Now a 20-call day, as I showed you, is an average day. And then what ends up happening is that really a 30-call day is that day that's, wow, okay, that was a busy day. So when I talked to him yesterday, he said, the problem that they had yesterday was, in addition to all the calls, they had a 22-minute period of time during the afternoon where we had 5 medical calls basically simultaneously. I don't have 5 medic units to be able to respond on all those calls. And so we've got crews going every which way. We're splitting crews up, trying to handle them. And then ultimately we're calling Corvallis to come in and handle those calls. And so actually twice over the last 2 days, the city of Corvallis has sent an ambulance over to Albany to actually transport a patient from Albany to our hospital, or whatever hospital that they transport that patient to. But they did transport those patients. And that's a more regular occurrence. The fact that we run out of medic units is a daily occurrence. Every day during the day, at some point in time, we're going to have no medic units available, and we rely on our mutual aid partners to help us out, I guess, if you will. The downside to that is it's even greater increased response times beyond what we're able to do here, and then it's also lost revenue, because when Corvallis comes over here and transports that patient to the hospital, we don't get a bill for that, bill the insurance company or the individual for that. Corvallis ends up doing that, and they charge an out-of-district rate. Same as if we went over there, we're taking somebody from Corvallis, they're not an Albany resident, so they're potentially going to get more, or be charged more. Go ahead, Will.
A lot of the function for police and fire are population related. And when I moved here in 1986, there were about 26,000 people. We built 2 new stations when there were about 37,000 people. That was an increase of about 11,000. We're now at 51,000, which is a 24,000 population increase. Is it time that we consider, after we rebuild a station that is so old that it's almost crumbling in front of us, to start considering more stations out there to reduce the amount of time it gets to a call?
Yeah, it's definitely something that needs to be considered. One of my biggest concerns is that if and when a new Station 11 does get built, that there's going to be this thought process of, oh, we got that taken care of, we don't have to worry about fire for a while. And realistically, I don't know if it'll be me or whoever comes after me, but we will need to look at a 5th station for this community, there's no doubt about that.
Well, I think it's planned into the South Albany plan, just as
It is,
yeah.
yeah. That is correct.
And
Might
jump
need one
back
east.
to your Corvallis coming over to help on emergency calls. Is there a reciprocal? Do we ever go over there and help them? So, is that balancing out? I mean, they're running into the same issues that we are?
They're seeing an increase in call volume. I would say anecdotally, we use them more than they use us. We're fortunate where we're located because we have 2 advanced life support transporting agencies on either side of us in Lebanon and Corvallis, so we can kind of, if we pick on one a little too much, we go and pick on the other one a little bit more. But we share the wealth. They don't have that opportunity like we have, but we do reciprocate, but we do utilize their services more than we use ours, or vice versa. The other thing I want to talk about was on overlapping calls. It's not just a medical situation, it's a fire situation. All of you are obviously aware of the fire at South Albany High School that occurred. About 4 or 5 minutes into that call, there was a second fire of a trailer that was parked right next to a structure that people were sleeping inside. We had to break an engine company away from the South Albany fire to respond to the other fire, and we had actually, fortunately, 4 people on that engine that night, and they were on their own on that fire because there was no other units available. Obviously, we called mutual aid in. We went to a 4th alarm on that, I believe, and so we had a lot of mutual aid coming, but that just takes time to get those additional resources there. So it happens on the fire side as well as the medical side, and it's just something that we have to deal with.
Chief?
Yeah.
Is there, have we recognized that the new calls are any specific malady, the reason that the people call? Is it just a larger volume of the same old stuff, or is there something that we're getting a lot more of?
So it's twofold. I'll answer that twofold. One, it's a larger volume of the same old stuff. We're definitely seeing more fires, more medical calls, more heart attacks, more MVAs, well, even more motor vehicle accidents. You saw that in Chief Latanzio's. It's just more people moving around. The community is growing. I know what I was going to say. Sorry, I had to think about that for a second. The other part is we are seeing an increase in public assistance. So we'll respond, like I talked about, when somebody has fallen and they're stuck between their toilet and the wall and they can't get up, and their loved one who's taking care of them is too elderly to be able to. They call us. They call 911, and we go out. They're not hurt. They just can't stay there on the floor. We're seeing probably a greater increase of public assistance, which is why we want to direct that basic life support unit to be able to go and handle those types of calls.
Thank you.
And I do see there is a big demand with that, with the senior facilities. And I was even seeing my in-laws being in assisted living the last fall, so the last month that my father-in-law was living, our medics had to come and pick him up. So because he was a very large man, and all of the caregivers at the assisted living could not even pick him up. It took having to call our paramedics to come help pick him up. And there's many even the past couple years, my family's been that recipient of having to have the medics come out and just pick up a senior. And that's, when they're in assisted living, you think there would be the staffing to go ahead and be there to be able to pick up someone, because that's the reason you usually put your loved one in that assisted living, because so there is that resource there. But it just, at many situations, it just takes a stronger type paramedic to be able to come in and be able.
Or the facility purchasing lifts to do that work, and many of them don't. They rely on the fire department.
Correct. That's an issue we deal with.
That's put a big demand. So you're thinking about getting sort of this kind of different level of, medics that would be able to handle those types of calls. Would they still be going out in an ambulance, or would you be sending them out in, say, one of the SUVs to just handle that?
No, they would be in an ambulance because they would be transporting basic life support individuals to the hospital.
Okay.
So one of the things we talked about, we have 4 similar ambulances and we have 2 dissimilar ambulances. They're older remounts. They're old Fords, if you will. We may target one of those older Fords, one of those remounts that we have, and put those individuals in that. So we haven't worked out on the details of that, but they would have to be in an ambulance, yes. Will, you're referring to the population. So this is a comparison of what our calls have done compared to the population. The red line, or red and black line, I should say, is our call volume from the previous, and then the blue line is what our population has done since 1991. You can see in 2007 we got, if you will, close to the 2 crossing, and then with the recession, the population still kept going up a little bit, not a lot obviously, but our call volume came down, and in 2014 we saw our first increase or overage of those calls going over the actual population that we have for the community. So what's the impact? Well, one of the impact is there's more people in the community, more people accessing health care, more people going to Albany General Hospital and then needing to go to the Corvallis Regional Medical Center or OHSU or Eugene down to Riverbend or another hospital. And so we are also seeing an increase, probably of the same level as the other increases, but we're also seeing an increase of transfers of patients out of town. We take patients to Albany General, they come in from private vehicle or otherwise, and we're just seeing that our number of transfers has gone up. Typically in the past, we would run around 400 transfers a year. This year, we're actually on track to do just under 500 transfers out of town, taking patients to other facilities. So the next point I wanted to get into is calls per firefighter per year, just to try and show what the impact is on our personnel, because all these additional calls definitely have an impact on the firefighters and the paramedics and the individuals in our organization. So if you go back to 1991, the far left side there, we had 39 emergency responders. Those were firefighters on the line. That was their daily responsibility. They would go on calls, 3 shifts of 13. And they averaged, based on the call volume that we had at that time, they averaged 86.3 calls per firefighter per year. And then in 1998, when we opened up stations 13 and 14, the 2 newest stations, we had 48 emergency responders, and we averaged 89 calls per year per firefighter. Fast forward to 2013, and we had 66 emergency responders, and that was the year, or one of the years, that we had the SAFER. We had 6 additional firefighters because of the SAFER grant, and that number increased that year to 97.7, almost 98 calls per firefighter per year. And then this current year, we obviously don't have the SAFER staffing anymore, so we're down to 60 emergency responders currently, and we're at an average of 124.3 calls per firefighter. This is significant. That's about a 40% increase in workload for the firefighters and the first responders since the new stations opened. So that's huge. I was talking to one of the individuals from IT, and he said, man, if you took any work group and you said you're going to do 40% more over the next few years per person, that's huge. That's going to have an impact on you. So what is the impact? Oh, go ahead, Ray.
Those 6 positions that you had, those folks that came on and were hoping for a career in fire, we couldn't keep them off the top of your head. Were they able to find a position in some other community?
So we were actually able to retain 5 of the 6 through attrition in our department.
Okay, right.
People left retirement or they went other jobs or whatever. We had one individual that he ended up getting hired down in Eugene. He was actually, I think, the last one on the list, if I remember right, and he had concerns about stability, and he had a stable job offer from down there, but everybody else was able to be hired. So what's the impact? Well, what we're seeing is an increase in the number of work-related injuries as this job takes both the physical and a mental toll on our personnel. During this current year, we're through to the first 10 months, we're actually at 7,400 hours of time lost due to work-related injuries just in this year alone. That averages out to 3 firefighters, 3 full-time firefighters off duty for the whole year, or because we run 3 different shifts, 1 firefighter off every single day because of injuries, and all of those are actually, I think they've all been determined to be work-related injuries. So I've had two or three, at least two that have had shoulder injuries or shoulder surgeries, knee surgeries, different things like that. But that's definitely something that we're experiencing. As that call volume goes up, we increase the exposure, the ability for the individuals to get hurt on a more regular basis, and so that's having an impact on the organization. That amount does not reflect any just daily sick leave, somebody having the flu or just a regular illness. So that number, that total, does not reflect any sick leave usage as well. So that would be above and beyond that. An additional impact is that it affects our ability to get callback. We're the size of department that we are. We rely, or we try to rely at least, on people to come in off duty in order to help us when we have a major incident or we have a significant number of calls going on at the same time. And what we find is that fewer and fewer people want to come in on their days off, partly due to the fact that, well, I ran 26 calls yesterday and I'm exhausted. I'm tired. I'm trying to recover from that because they were up all night or a good portion of the night. So we're having issues with that. And just as a general reminder for the city councilors that are here and new information for the budget committee members, last night came and requested the permission to apply for the SAFER grant. We are obviously in the process of doing that. We are hoping to get 6 additional firefighters like we did last time, but I will tell you it's an extremely competitive process. We were extremely fortunate to get it last time. A lot of other departments have got it, and they've cracked the nut, I guess, if you will, and they've figured out what it took to get a SAFER grant. And so now all of those departments, not just us, but they're resubmitting, they're retooling their application, and they're resubmitting, and they're requesting similar resources to what we're requesting. So the information that we've received is that it will be even more competitive this year than it's been in the past. I'm sure that's part of the reason. And as the city manager said last night, this is not a permanent fix. We were fortunate enough to have them for a couple-year period of time. Actually, one of them left us 7 months early, and we weren't able to fill some positions right away. But at least we did have some additional staffing for a short period of time, but it definitely is not a permanent solution.
So how much is this SAFER grant for?
If memory serves me correctly, we were requesting $1,374,000. The last one was $1,197,000, almost $1.2 million. This one's 1.374, I think. So the staffing issues, I referred to our deputy fire marshals and our public educators, but I wanted to provide an example of how, what impact we're seeing in our life safety division. So I included this chart, and I realize a lot of the numbers on there, and I'll take just a second to explain it to you. But on the far left-hand side is a column that shows that we have identified we have 3,214 occupancies. These are business occupancies. You could have the mall, Heritage Mall. That's multiple occupancies because you have multiple businesses inside that need to be inspected. So a total of just over 3,200 occupancies. And then we've also identified how often we should be getting into these occupancies based on commonly accepted practices. And we've taken a look at the highest hazard ones as ones we should be getting in annually or every year. And then the second section there in red, how many we should be getting in every 2 years, and then every 3 years, and then every 4 years. And so you can see the schedule or the number that we have total that we should be inspecting. In order to meet that schedule, we should be conducting somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,445 inspections per year. You can see since 2011, we have not even come close to that. Our best year, we had a brief period of time in 2014 where we actually had a third person in that position, and we were firing on all cylinders for a brief period of time. We actually did 850, but still well short of that 1445 that is needed each year, or we should be achieving each year. So what's the impact? Well, the impact of that is that means that we are, as a department, more reactive than proactive. I can't draw a direct correlation between number of inspections and number of fires, because you don't know how many fires, how many medical calls, how many fall injuries, how many traffic accidents, how many of those types of things that you prevent because they didn't happen. But obviously, the commonly accepted standard is that prevention and providing life safety education and inspections does pay dividends, and it's obviously not something that we're seeing at this point in time. Equipment replacement is my last item, and so what I wanted to do is just show you guys the identified needs that we have. I'm not going to go through what each one of these is, but just to tell you that in this coming budget, the budget we're preparing for, we've identified about $810,000 of equipment replacement needs. We have $185,000 in the budget, and so we've budgeted, like I said, to expend all of that. That'll go to remounting a second ambulance and replacing one staff vehicle that's in excess of 20 years old. It won't take care of all the other items on that list. In 2017, we've identified right at about $1 million of equipment replacement needs. Highest priority there is the first one, replacing our firefighter turnout gear. That's something that obviously when we're sending our crews into a structure fire, we want to make sure that their gear is appropriate and adequate to be able to protect them. And we're on a replacement schedule for that, and we need to be replacing that. And then I wanted to look 5 years out just to give a 5-year picture. And you can see the dollar totals there, and what it comes out to is a total 5-year equipment replacement needs of just over $3 million. With the $185,000 that we're funding this year, we're right at about $3 million of equipment replacement that will need to be addressed over the next 5 years. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or any more questions.
Unlike the police department, which is, when they're showing presence, they see less crime. We can have all kinds of firefighters, and you're still going to have people falling, people needing assistance getting up. On these large facilities, has the city council explored having a fee for service for a facility that's going to have repeated high levels of calls for the non-emergency help and emergency help, so that is helping to pay for the use of equipment and possible hiring of more firefighters, so that we're not stretching our crews so thin?
Mm-hmm. On the emergency side, no, because the facility typically can't control if that person's having a heart attack in their room, even if they're a senior or whatever the case may be. On the non-emergency side, the falls and us going in, if you will, augmenting their staff, yes, Wes and I have had conversations about that, and that may be something that the council ends up seeing come forward. There's a lot of logistics in figuring out exactly how that bill gets worked out, who pays the bill. Ideally, it would be the facility that would pay the bill, but sometimes the facility, and oftentimes the facility doesn't have any control whether 911 is called or not. The individual in the room calls, we're going to pick them up, we're augmenting their staffing. The facility says, well, we didn't call, and so you kind of get into this finger-pointing thing of, well, do you go after the patient for calling, or how do you work that out? So there's a lot of details to work out, but we have had some initial conversations about exploring that opportunity.
I think it's a very good time to have it, because I don't think the senior wave has gotten to a crest yet, so I think we're still low on the wave.
I would agree.
Just a couple of the line items on page 260 of the budget. It's the 1208 Fire Emergency Services, Material and Services 60211 Insurance and Bonds. Mm-hmm. Nice, it dropped rather dramatically due to?
If you notice, it's due to experience, and Stuart could probably talk more about exactly how that number's set. It's a fixed number that we receive. But if you do notice in, I believe it was our 1203 budget, we did see an increase on that side over there just because of experience in that budget. So there was, if I remember correctly, there was an overall in our 3 budgets, a slight decrease of it. But this decrease was offset by an increase over on this
Then
side.
down the page, 63006 Power and Light
Mm-hmm.
jumped up quite a bit.
Yeah, that one jumped up because that was actually looking at what our numbers were tracking currently. And so we tried to make sure that our number reflected where we were in experience for this current year.
And then just 3 down from it, the water service.
Yeah, I'm interested in that one.
Yeah,
too.
yeah. What we found this year is actually, and Shane, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but our water and sewer service were both coming out of the same line item. And if you notice, we weren't having, year-to-date, we'd only had 792 taken out of, I guess it's sewer service charges. And so we ended up then just taking everything out of the one line item and combining the two together.
Okay, so it's comparable then, yeah.
It's comparable, yes.
And 2 below that, breathing air.
That makes sense.
Breathing air, the decrease on that one?
No, the number. This, you have your own compressors?
Mhm.
And this is maintenance on the compressors?
Well, it's some maintenance on the compressors. It's, if I remember correctly, our bottles are at the end of their cycle for the number of years, and so I think we're purchasing some new ones.
Yeah, and we're also we're at the point with our self-contained breathing apparatus that we're having to do some rebuilds on them. So the maintenance budget isn't just, even though it's titled breathing air, it also is spent on upgrading, improving, and doing rebuilds.
So are you hydro testing them or are you replacing them?
I believe we already hydro tested them once, if I remember correctly. I think now we have some bottles that we're in the process of replacing, I believe.
Is there a different number? I mean, regular cylinders, you can do that until they fail hydro test. And hydro test is, relatively inexpensive compared to replacement.
And I'm not sure exactly as far as
Could you let me know?
Yeah, sure.
It's something you may be able to save some money on.
Yeah.
John, is our revenue from the fire districts, is it flat, stationary, or is there an opportunity to increase revenue?
I would say it's increasing slightly. It's based, our current rate of what we charge them is based on a $2 per thousand of their assessed value. And obviously with the mill closing, Albany Rural saw a significant decrease of that. And over the last couple of years, that has rebounded and it's come up a little bit. Probably in the last 2 years, about 3% a year or somewhere thereabouts. We've seen greater increases in North Albany and a little bit less increases with Palestine Rural Fire District. But overall, we've probably a couple of years ago reached the bottom with the assessed values, and then so obviously the amount of money that we're receiving from them.
Kind of a follow-up to one of the other questions about fee for service. If you respond to a lot of vehicle accidents where you don't transport, is there an opportunity to build insurance for responding to those?
So like a fire response type of an aspect on that?
Either fire, police gets a vehicle crash.
Right,
You respond also,
right,
but you don't transport anybody.
right.
You don't get any fee currently. Is there an opportunity to bill for responding to that vehicle crash?
There's an opportunity. I've talked to my counterparts in the two surrounding agencies, and from the amount of money that they receive, it generally offsets the administrative cost of being able to bill out for that. So it's not a significant moneymaker. It's something that we've taken a look at and we'll continue to take a look at in the future, and it may be something that we end up going to if we're able to support it. Part of the problem is we don't want to bring a program on and then not have the ability to support it administratively.
Scott?
So moneymaker, I'd rather say cost recovery. If it gets out in the public that fire department's trying to make money.
Sure.
Wouldn't sound so good.
Thank you.
Going back to page 6 with emergency calls compared to population, and showing the graph and where there's the intersection and such. First of all, on emergency calls, are you including in that model, the advanced EMT program that you're talking, and that some of those calls would be satisfied through a different level of personnel?
So
Would they be included in that emergency?
in all of these calls, these are all 911 calls. So these are individuals have called 911, whether it be a structure fire or Alpha Bravo, Charlie, or Delta response, medical, MVA, hazardous materials calls. That's every time that we were dispatched on a call, total number of calls.
So then, looking at a point where a graph intersects to be able to determine, hey, we're projecting that we're going to be above the line, correct me if I'm wrong, the math works out to about 135 and a third calls per population of 1,000? I mean, where do you come up with your number that says my red line now intersects with my blue line, or my red line goes above? If I just take the intersection and divide red by blue, I come up with 135 and a third. And when your red goes above in 2015 for projected, that comes out to roughly 142.7 calls per 1,000. So how do you determine that this is an acceptable level at break even, or this is below, or this is above? Where did you come up with the number 135 as, if I'm doing my math correctly?
And I'm not sure I'm following you correctly. I mean, I guess I'm not using that as a comparison to determine the workload. I'm looking more at response times and what our response times are doing, and then the amount of workload per firefighter per year. And I'm probably not answering your question correctly.
Well, on the left axis of the graph, I see number of calls, and on the right axis, I see population. So if my two graphs end up like this, why not just lower this one so that my red line's below my blue line?
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
I mean, it seems arbitrary. I know there's a reason behind why you chose to put it at that level. Because it leads to the next thing, is how do we increase staffing, and how do we decrease the number of calls per population, or be able to respond in an adequate time frame?
Sure. And I guess I wasn't trying to show a number of calls per population or anything like that. This was more just to try to show the two lines together in comparison.
Okay.
More so than anything else.
So then, and finally, sorry to monopolize, with going to the advanced EMT and looking at staffing and everybody else asking questions about how many fire stations, adequate staffing, and so forth, and your response times are somewhere, did you say right around 9 minutes?
Well, 9 minutes to get a full complement of 15 personnel on a structure fire.
Okay.
That is about 7.5 minutes for an emergency medical call.
So 7.5 minutes, and you had said that that's increasing, showing a demand or burden on existing staff and maybe not being staffed as well. Do you do any breakout or analysis of the time of the response? I know you have, from time the call came in to the time you arrived. Do you break any of those in segments that you're also able to track in the way of, okay, how long did it take us from call to launch? We had bodies in the vehicle moving. And then were there delays because you were in other locations and understaffed? And then I would think your travel time is going to be a complement of both. We had to travel further because we weren't at our station, or we had to travel less because we just happened to be around the corner. Mm-hmm. And you would average those, and you'd be able to say, okay, if this is the breakup of all my response times, here's the impact of being inadequately staffed.
Yes, in answer to your question, short answer. Long answer is we break it down from the time into 4 different areas, I guess, 3 and then a greater area, 3 subsets. We track it from the time the call is received at 911 until it is dispatched, and so that starts a clock and stops a clock. From the time then that we're dispatched till that we go en route, and then from the time that we go en route till the time we get on scene. Okay. And so that travel time, our turnout time is what we call it, how long it takes us to turn out for the call, and then how long it takes the dispatcher to do their job, to receive the information and to then send us on the call. And then the culmination of all of that, the time the call is received till the time we're at scene, we take a look at that, which is what I'm referring to.
Okay. So I guess out of that there would be one piece of information that might be helpful, and that is what delay has occurred because I had to try and find someone else from another city or from another location or such to be able to dispatch that I would have been able to dispatch directly from a station. Because at some point in time, you've got to be able to project, if things don't change, my response time goes from 7 minutes to 8 minutes to 9 minutes to 10 minutes, and the higher that response time gets, the more difficult it is for people to get insurance rates at an acceptable level, right? Because I think insurance rates that we all pay for business at home is based on the average response time, fire department.
It's actually based on the ISO rating, or Insurance Services Office rating, and they don't actually look at response times. They look at your number of stations, they look at your number of hydrants, they look at your communication system, they look at your water supply. The city's done a great job of improving its water supply over the last few years, and so we've historically had an ISO rating of 3. Obviously, at some point in time, that's going to be potentially impacted. We just went through that last in 2010, and our initial grading of that was we dropped from a 3 to a 4, and then we went back and appealed it and made a few changes. We were able to bring that back to a 3.
Okay.
As a scale.
So,
Yeah, 1 to 10, yeah.
right. So that goes back to what I was asking about with, at what point does the number of stations we have become inadequate? And that would be a population-driven question, What population does Albany have to get to where the number of stations we have is inadequate?
I think it's
And causes that huge increase in your ISO rating.
I think it's not necessarily a population-driven determination. You could have a population of 50,000 25-year-olds that never use the service, and so having additional stations isn't potentially going to be necessary. It also has to do with your travel distance. Our city is, I believe, around 18 square miles. If we were 50,000 people, but we were spread out over 25 square miles or something larger than that, you'd have longer travel distance. So it's really more driven by your response times and things like that, more so than population, I guess. And so that's why the 7.5-minute medical response times to emergency medical calls is concerning. Obviously, it's significantly more than the national standard says that it should be.
Do you have the response times broken out as to area?
Area of the city?
Right.
No. It's just overall the response times for the department.
With the new software, are you going to be able to get that?
I hope we're able to get a lot more than we can get currently. To get these response times, these were literally all calculated by hand. It was data entry into an Excel spreadsheet, and then be able to sort it from there. And so my goal is that the new software will allow us to do a lot more than we can do currently. That's why it's so cumbersome, and I felt bad that I was giving you data that was from the first quarter of this year. That's why I went back and I looked at the previous week to say, okay, how is this in comparison? But honestly, I could probably spend 45 minutes to an hour every single day just dealing with response times, and that's just not good use of my time.
Well, it would be interesting information given where you would want to add people. I mean, if you know that your response time is slow at 13 or at 11 or, wherever, that's where you'd want to put more people.
And realistically, where we need to put more people is Station 14 in North Albany. We only staff 3 out at that station, whereas the other stations we're staffing 4 or 5 at those stations. So we have dual units at those stations. We only cross staff 2 units. So the crew that's working on the medic unit at Station 14 in North Albany, they're also on the engine. And so when that crew is gone on a transfer, which we're on pace to, I think, 489 transfers this year, when they're gone on a transfer, there's no immediate protection up in the North Albany area. When we had the safer staffing, we were able to add an individual to that station, and so we actually responded with 4 out of there, which allowed us for that engine company to be able to provide 2 in, 2 out on fire calls immediately. Currently, they have to wait for another crew to get there before they can take action, interior action on a fire. And then it also allowed us to staff 2 medic units at that station as well. We could pull the first 2 individuals off, they could handle that transfer or that first medical call, and then we still left back an advanced life support medic unit. They didn't have direct fire protection, but they had an advanced life support medic unit that was available there to protect the 7,000+ people that live up there. So ultimately, it wouldn't necessarily be driven by where the calls are at, but the units that we need to be able to staff and our ability to staff an additional medic unit and then a 4-person engine up there.
So with a 200-bed senior facility coming online in North Albany, that's really going to stretch you thin.
Very. Yeah. So it's a little less. It's 143, 144, something like that. So it's concerning. It's definitely concerning to us.
I'd just like to compliment the chief and the department. We had an event a couple months ago where we had to call for emergency services. And it's not just the fact that they respond in 5 or 6 or 7 minutes, but it's the quality of service they deliver when they get there. You know, here I am, my wife is in trouble. I'm going crazy. These guys come in, they calm me down, they fix her up, they transport her to the hospital, and we're all good. But it's the care that they take with the citizens they serve that's also as important as that extra 30 seconds. So I appreciate what they did for us and what they do for the community.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I can second that, and I took pictures while it was happening because I couldn't do anything else. I gave them pictures afterwards.
You know, most people don't realize that there's typically more than one patient that we're dealing with. There's the individual that's having the medical situation that has got that family to the point. You're exactly right. Got that family to the point of, okay, this is beyond our control, we need help. And so they've dialed 911, they've called us. But there's also the loved ones, the spouse, the children, depending on what the situation is. There can be underage children that are there that we have to deal with. And our crews do an outstanding job of taking care of all the patients, all the family, all the individuals. We're actually really proud of our Facebook page. And if you're not a Facebook friend of the fire department, I'd invite you to join us. You can see some of the outstanding things that we're doing on a regular basis on there, and you'll get more of a glimpse into that type of stuff.
Like delivering pizza.
Like delivering pizza, that's right. And we went on a call of a pizza delivery person, and they were unable to complete it, and so I believe that was yesterday, if I remember right. The crews completed that call for that pizza delivery driver. He had a medical event, and we finished the call. So it's kind of that value-added service, and it's the outstanding things that our crews do day in and day out, every single day.
Well, I have a very telling response time. A friend of ours became in medical distress. They lived out in the boonies out by Scio, and it took 15 minutes for an emergency vehicle to get there. She was dead. So those response times are critical.
They are, most definitely.
Did you have an answer to a question?
I can answer your question. Actually, I have the itemized list of what is in that budget line. We aren't replacing any bottles this year. We are hydro testing 50 bottles. And then the bulk of the money is being spent on overhauling some of the different stages on the SCBA, as well as we're replacing all the face shields in our SCBA masks. They're getting scratched up over time. So that's where the money's going.
How much is the hydro test?
We have, so we're going to do 50 at, it looks like $36.75 a bottle.
I want to check that.
Okay.
Half that.
Okay, good to know.
Our air packs are on it's a standard. You have to replace them, the complete air pack, every 15 years. I believe we're 9 years into it. This budget will be our 10th year on it. And so I don't think I included that in the equipment replacement, but 6 years out, there's a very significant item there of having to replace our air packs. So we'll be doing that here in about 5 or 6 years.
That number does include any sort of repairs as well.
Chief, on page 259, where you've got the budgeted FTEs, and the asterisk in this current budget year. So the 6140, does that include the two safer positions or not?
So the 6140 or the 6460?
6140.
So the current years. That one, there were two authorized EMT or firefighter EMT positions that were funded by the SAFER grant, and they were transferred in. No, I don't believe that included them. Those positions ended up getting absorbed through attrition. We had actually a retirement that just occurred here April 30th, so one of those just came in.
So going from 6140 to 6460, then you're going up 3 positions?
So 2 positions are those basic life support individuals, and the third position was what we talked to the council last night about using the private fire line fees in order to hire an administrative person to be able to deal with that. Currently, the water department has a private fire line fee that they're able to charge commercial customers for increased size due to a sprinkler system or something along those lines. And so we're going to transfer those funds or that billing process from being a water department to a fire department. Public Works, the water department doesn't need that anymore. It's a fee that we do need, and so that's going to allow us to bring somebody in through those revenues that we're generating from those private fire lines to be able to staff that additional person. So that's the additional person that's in there.
Okay, and the 2 advanced EMT positions, which station would you put those?
Most likely, probably at Station 11. We'll put them on a medic unit at Station 11.
It's not going to help your North Albany staffing situation.
Well, only for basic life support calls. They're gonna respond all over the district, and so Station 11 is the most centrally located area. The other thing about it is that since they're single role, they're not dual role, and I'll explain that in that a dual role is a firefighter and an EMT. These are just EMTs. The federal laws are such that we cannot work them the same work schedule that we work a firefighter. A firefighter can work a 56-hour-a-week work schedule. A single role EMT can only work a 40-hour-a-week work schedule. So they'll be probably like a Tuesday through Friday, 7 to something or a 9 to something, a 10-hour period, 4 10s, somewhere in that range out of the downtown station. Okay, well, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Chief.
How much
Hello.
time do you want to give me? Do you want to end by 9, or what's your desire? I can do the Cliff Notes version if that's what you.
Well, I don't
require.
remember you being super long in past years.
Well, you've got
Did
to
you
talk
have
to
an
different
hour
people.
presentation tonight?
I do not.
Okay,
I don't have enough words in my head to fill an hour, so.
all right. Well,
All right.
let's get started.
Let's get started and see what happens, and if you need to cut me short, you can do that. Okay, I'll try to be expeditious here, and I'm not going into a lot of detail. Just as I did last year, I think it is helpful to remind you of sort of the breadth, if you will, of the services that my department is responsible for, and why we do what we do and how we go about our business. I think trying to keep the conversation at a high level, but I think that will give you an opportunity to ask some more detailed questions. Obviously, we believe in our mission. Interestingly, this whole evening has been geared around public safety. One thing I would like to encourage you to think about is that public safety isn't just a matter of departments. It's actually a purpose, a government purpose. And each and every city department has a role to play in making sure the city is a safe place, a well place, a healthy place. We emphasize healthy and well, I think is probably the best way to look at it. So we also
spend a lot of time and effort and money helping other departments make this a safe place. And Mario earlier talked about the collaboration, and Sandy, between the Parks and Recreation Department and police. There are similar relationships with with fire as well. So think of public safety in a broader context, I think, is the way I would encourage you. So we have various service areas. Not all of these correspond directly to a program within the budget, but some of them do. We manage public property. We have about 900 acres total in our inventory, half of which is conservation easement. The other properties would be, and most of the properties in count would be active parks, timberland, neighborhood parks like Taquina and so forth. We do other things in our property management function. We have a building maintenance division. It's actually in another fund, Fund 701, as opposed to 202, which is the Parks and Recreation Fund. So as I'll indicate again later, we operate in different funds. It's not just the one Parks and Recreation Fund. One of the things the building maintenance division does, and the council heard about this last night from the Monteith Historical Society, is it works very hard and very closely with the Historical Society to make sure the Monteith House is in good shape. And so we have a role to play in taking care of that historic structure. We also take care of street medians that are landscaped and that are defined by sidewalks and curbs. And we certainly take care of the downtown streetscape as well. And again, I would wager to guess that half of you weren't aware of some of those things. We have an urban forest management program. Just thinking a little bit about that, that's a lot of trees. And the 14,000 trees are just within the street right away. You could easily double that number of trees if you count all the trees within the parks and the conservation areas that we are responsible for managing. We have community festivals and events. This is probably what we are best known for. It is certainly what we are best known for across the state in the Pacific Northwest. It's an award-winning program. Obviously, Northwest Art and Air is our biggest one. River Rhythms is the longest in duration. Katie, what are we now? How many years, River Rhythms? 33. A bit beyond me. I think that the points I want to emphasize here is those events and programs, they attract people. And many of those people that they attract actually come from other places. And Rich and I have had this conversation, as well as the mayor, a number of times. There are heads in beds in our hotels and motels as a result of these events. And it's not just these events, but it's also our sporting events, our aquatic swim meets, where those events could last for 2 to 3 days. And people are coming from out of town and spending money here in this community. And we actually occasionally do exit polls to find out, how much did you spend? Are you from out of town? Did you stay? And just based on hard data and not extrapolating it, direct expenditures somewhere a year about $4 to $5 million in this economy that come from visitors who don't live here. So think about that a little bit. That's a pretty significant value that goes to pay for other things in this community. We have recreational, educational, arts, and cultural experiences. Some of the program areas are listed there. The senior center is an obvious one, and we talked about seniors a lot today. And Will, do you have a question?
No, it's a statement, and,
okay.
And it's I want to commend your folks for the partnership that they've done with the Albany Public School Foundation to bring
the
arts and culture back into our schools.
Yeah.
It's been a real help, and they've done a fantastic job.
Yeah, and if you're talking about the most recent event that's being put together, is that what you're working on, or you're talking about other programs?
That's just one.
Yeah,
that's just
it.
one.
Yeah.
So,
and that one
like
is gone. That's gone on for what, 20 years or so?
Next year will be
30.
Ants are in harmony back there.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why they're here, because my mind is starting to slip.
One soprano, one alto. It works great.
Yeah, they blend very well.
But the partnership
I
is
suggested,
really
I
good.
told you that we have a building maintenance division. It's 3 employees and their supervisor, who is also supervising certain aspects of park maintenance. So he wears a number of hats. We take care of 19 city buildings and their grounds, and that's about 300,000 square feet that those guys take care of. Aquatics and sports I mentioned earlier, again emphasizing that they also have a beneficial economic impact on this community. And by the way, that $2 million is extremely conservative, and it's growing because the number of tournaments that we are offering at Timberland and Bryant Parks, because of the improvements we've made to our field, is climbing every year. And again, people come and they stay. City Hall reception and customer service, if you call in here and you don't have a utility billing question, or you're not going directly to one of the other departments, you're going to come through our front desk. We have 3 commissions. We are responsible for the city's public arts program. That includes the exhibits here in City Hall. And one particular thing that I'm especially proud of, and it's about ready to receive a statewide award, and that's the Sawing for Schools program and the White Oak restoration effort that we work on. The Sawing for Schools is a collaborative with the school district. By the way, not just this school district, we also benefit Corvallis schools as well. So how do we do all that? Well, it's through partnerships, and it's through volunteers, and it's through generosity in this community. We are only 24 full-time bodies and 26.7 FTE in the department. And so with that few people, you can't get all this done unless you have tremendous help from this community. And so I want to emphasize that. A little over $500,000 in gifts and donations of both cash and in-kind services that go directly to offsetting costs that we would otherwise have to, write a check for. That's a lot of businesses and agencies in this community that we consider partners, and we're very proud of that. 38,000 hours of volunteer service a year just in the Parks and Recreation Department. If we had to pay for it, that's 18 FTE, which would almost double the size of the department. So I think we are pretty effective, and we're pretty efficient with the resources that we're charged with managing. 26.7 FTE, that's up 0.7 FTE this year from the previous year. And by the way, that didn't get added. That came from the foster grandparent program, which is a program that was in Fund 203, which has been terminated for us. Cash donations secured, this is just cash now, $10.87, almost $11 per capita. When we had a peer group nationally to compare ourselves to, and there are not very many of those doing the measurement anymore, the average was 75 cents per capita in our peer group, and we're sitting at $11 per capita that we get to support and avoid costs in the programs that the community wants and needs from us. Efficient and effective performance. 2/3 of all the work, the actual work that gets done in the Parks and Recreation Department, is not performed by an employee of the department. It's performed by a contract instructor, it's performed by a custodial service, it's performed by someone outside the circle of being a City of Albany employee. That's pretty significant. Another way to look at that is, and you'll see a slide coming up, only 35% of our total budget is personnel. It gets flipped for most other functions, but only 35% of our budget is personnel. What do our customers say? Well, you've seen the surveys before. This is a year old now, but they think that we actually do a pretty darn good job. So, it's not just a matter of managing resources effectively. It's also a matter of trying to squeeze as much out of a dollar as you can get. We have also had to reduce the number of FTE over the years, and some of you at the dais here were a part of that process. We're adding 0.7 FTE back. I'm sorry, Rich, but we got to do it. We reclassify when we eliminate a position. We always look for an opportunity to take a position and try to make it work better for us.
And so when we have a vacancy, we look at it, we examine what the department's needs are, and we have done a number of reclassifications and downgrades from one position to a lower paid position to manage costs and try to improve the impact of that position. This year's no different. We have 2 reclassifications that are in the adult services budget, the senior center budget that we've tackled this year. Again, taking some of that foster grandparent position and bringing it back into the senior center. 35%, I mentioned that earlier. We have also pretty much gutted the Parks and Recreation Department's capital improvements program. I'll show you a slide a little bit later that lists the one project that is alive and well. It's the way we have to save money. 3 funds. 203 is the grants fund. Currently, we don't have anything in there, but the council knows that we've applied for an Oregon Marine Board grant to replace one of our park restrooms at Bowman Park. If we get that grant, the budget will be amended, and then we'll have a project within Fund 203, but right now it's sitting empty. So revenues come from different places. If you look at just the operating programs, and that would exclude Park SDCs, the senior endowment, and my mind is slipping on the other one, but we've got 3 self-supporting programs. This chart does not include those. So if you just look at our base operating programs, this is where the money comes from. I wanted to make a note here for you. Funds transferred from other sources, $192,600 in this next budget is proposed to come from the transient lodging tax revenues into the Parks and Recreation Department's resources, paying for the trolley and its operation and maintenance, as well as Northwest Art and Air. And that is an ongoing conversation that I know the council and Wes will have in terms of our current allocation policy of TLT funds. But right now, that's what's in the budget. The general fund every year gives us $187,000 and change. 102 of that pays for the YMCA contribution, the Boys and Girls Club contribution, the community before and after school care contribution, 101.8. And another $80,000, $86,000 goes to support the urban forestry program, which it has since long before I got here. So expenditures for this year in Fund 202 only. That's the number. Those are the numbers that you see on your pages. Operating programs, self-supporting programs. In the operating program budget, from last year to this next year, or current year to the next year, we'll see a 2.5% increase, $162,300 increase. And I've broken out for you what that pays for. That pays for $146,000 in personnel, wages, and benefits. But I also make a note that $63,000 of that $146,000 is coming from Fund 203 into Fund 202. So there's actually a net increase, wages and benefits, due to contractual obligations with our union employees. That is about $80,000 net. Self-supporting programs includes Park SDC, as I suggested earlier. This is where the money goes. This is how the pie is divvied up. Administration at first, I think at first blush, would look large to people. You don't think of administration as being a third of the program. Keep in mind that in our budgeting, administration covers all central service charges for all programs. It covers all the telephones, all the bills that we pay related to HR services, finance services. It pays for building maintenance. It pays for all of those central service charges, those indirect costs. And what's left in each program budget is the direct expense to deliver that service. And the reason we do it that way is because we set fees. And if we set fees to include all of those indirect costs, then our fee structure goes through the roof, and people can't afford the services that we're currently delivering. So, issues and challenges, we have a Parks and Recreation Master Plan dated 2006. It's set to expire this next year. We're updating it this next fiscal year, in fact, beginning the process this month. But we have, as I said earlier, pretty much gutted the Parks and Recreation Department's capital improvements program. We've had to delay virtually every project that was left in the master plan just because the funding is not there. And you do what you need to do. The only funding that is healthy right now is Park SDCs. But here's the rub, and East Thornton Lake represents this rub. If we spend Park SDC money and build a new park, we don't have enough money coming in to pay for the operation of that park. And so I've elected to indefinitely suspend the development of East Thornton Lake Park until we get ourselves into a healthier position operationally. We just simply can't afford to build and maintain a brand-new park.
Ed, regarding
Yes.
that Thornton Lake thing, my memory's fading, but I seem to recall early in the process that there was something that had to be done to acquire or secure a state grant for some of the funding?
No, well, we secured the grant to acquire, and then what we wanted to do was apply for a grant for this development project. But it makes no sense to do that if we can't afford to operate it. And so we've put a very long pin in that project, and we're just going to hold it
There's no
until we can
clawback
figure out how to get there.
There's no clawback because we haven't done anything.
That's right.
Okay.
Other issues, we have a huge and growing repair and replacement maintenance backlog. The same money that would take care of a park also in our budgets pays for replacing irrigation systems, replacing lighting systems, taking care of broken sidewalks and repaving parking areas and things like that. And the money's not there, just is not there right now. We tackled a couple of projects this fiscal year, and the way we have to do it, if something breaks and it has to be fixed, and we've got to spend the money, then we don't spend money somewhere else. That's how we balance the checkbook. There's a finite amount of resources in our budget. And then, as I suggest, as every department suggests, staffing levels are inadequate and really stretched to the max. We've had a 50% increase in the number of park acres in Albany since I got here. Most of which, again, is acreage that's in conservation easement. But it still costs us several $100s a year to take care of a piece of property that isn't even developed. There are land management costs. Some of you have been in that business. And so it's not free to accept property. So I think I'm down to questions.
And one question, just a single line item.
Yep.
On page 275, under the
Okay.
park maintenance services.
Okay?
Item 65511, street resurfacing.
Yes.
Why is that your responsibility and not?
Yeah, it's
city
called street
public?
resurfacing, but what it really addresses is parking lots. And so we have a bunch of gravel parking lots that need to be regraded, re-gravelled, oiled, and the money goes to that purpose.
Okay.
Yeah, so we don't have a street.
So the comment about the transient room tax, you said that was an ongoing conversation. Is that related to Wes's comment in the budget message?
Yeah, and I don't know that I picked up on it, but did you mention using those funds possibly for other purposes?
Right,
Yeah,
equipment
okay, so yeah, it was-
replacement.
it was
It didn't say
mentioned.
where they were going to come from, but just that
Yeah.
he thought we could
Yeah,
use
so
them.
obviously that impacts allocations to all existing programs, including potentially Northwest Art and Air and trolley operations. But I was just wanting to make sure that with that conversation going on, you knew that the budget as it is right now does not, reflects the total allocation driven by the existing policy.
Speaking of the trolley, what happened to it last weekend? I saw it being towed by a wrecker.
Rick broke it.
Lost its water pump. Yeah, it's about 15 of us working out. It's out of
All right.
Did anybody find the water pump in question?
Oh, Will?
Can you talk a little bit about why the credit card fees are so cyclical. I mean, sometimes they're down low, like 12, 13, and you get over to 14, 15, and they're more than double, and you're saying it's going to even go up higher.
And sometimes people use credit cards to pay for the services they're buying from us, and that climbs, and that usually climbs when participation rates are climbing. Sometimes participation rates might drop or decline, and we usually see a drop in the use of credit cards to pay for services. I mean, it's directly related to participation rates and what we're offering, and it's also something that's just a continuing trend. People are more and more paying with plastic rather than checks or cash.
Have you considered building in a service fee for the fees into the fee?
I don't think, yeah, and is it true that we cannot do that? I think by law.
There have been changes in the regulations of credit cards to where we could impose a convenience fee.
Can.
Okay. That wouldn't be a Parks and Recreation Department policy, that would be a finance policy, and we're glad to ride their coattails if they want to do that.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, anything else?
Thank you, Ed.
All right.
So, moving on to Budget Committee discussion, we did have one adjustment sheet in front of us this evening. Are there any questions on that or comments? We have one more meeting next week, cover the rest of the binder and discussion and deliberation. Are there any other comments or requests for information for next week's meeting?
Just note of point of order, I will not be here for the next meeting.
Thank you.
Nor will I.
Neither will Floyd.
No.
Yeah, Floyd won't be here. Just those two, as far as I know, but I'm not sure.
Bill will not be here.
Bill won't either? Oh, right. So three.
Is the Budget Committee ready to approve the budget then, recommend?
We have a quorum. We have a quorum, I guess. Go for it. So, yeah. Will Bessie be back?
I believe so.
Yeah, Bessie and Dick, so, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, presentations, correct?
No.
No.
That's right, we got city managers who go through this, right, so we're not.
We got the
No.
TLT fight
Thinking,
coming
all
up.
right, just go ahead and prove it, you won't have to do it.
Yeah.
No.
Stuart?
I'd just like to point out a limitation on the Budget Committee, or not so much a limitation, but what it requires to approve the budget. We need to have a majority of members of the committee present to have a quorum. But we need a majority of the entire Budget Committee to pass an action. So that means we need 8 votes. I mention that because there are a few members that aren't going to be able to attend the next meeting. So those that can attend, your participation will be valued.
Right, if we're missing more than 4, right? So we've got
8 votes, so we can have 6 absent.
Well, or you may find yourselves in a position where you can get 8 of you to agree.
Yeah.
Other issues, so.
Thanks. All right, then the next meeting will be Thursday, the 21st, so this meeting is continued to May 21st, 2015. Meeting adjourned.